prove the Quran wrong? You die now. You want to prove the Quran wrong? It is very easy. You want to prove the Quran wrong? You die now. You want to prove the Quran wrong? It is very easy. You want to prove the Quran wrong? You die now. You want to prove the Quran wrong? It is very easy. You want to prove the Quran wrong? You die now. You want to prove the Quran wrong? It is very easy. You want to prove the Quran wrong? You die now.
All right. We are live. Welcome back to Reasoned Answers, your home for the
crackhead clown individuals.
Today we're going to be talking about Yasir Qadhi. 5 years ago, Yasir Qadhi gave us one of the most famous lines in Dawah.
The standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say.
And now he's back for Holes 2.0, as I'm dubbing it. You may have already seen this. You may have seen how he throws the Hadith under the bus, so to speak. He says, from an academic perspective, the Hadith have no credibility. From a historical, critical method, using the historical methods, yeah, you might be able to pull a few details here and there, but for the most part, no one will take these seriously at all. However, what you may not have seen is the rest of the interview. That is actually just one small segment of the interview. The purpose of the interview is to talk about his new book on the history of Salafi Islam, or the Salafi movement, or also known as the Wahhabist movement, because a couple individuals involved there. Ibn Taymiyyah kind of, starts the movement, as Yasir Qadhi will explain. But what really gives it life is an individual named Wahhab that eventually leads to the formation of Saudi Arabia. And then Saudi Arabia spreads this version of Islam around the globe. Most of the Dawah guys either will directly identify as Salafi or will share very Salafi type ideas. Yasir Qadhi self-identified as a member of that movement, but now self-identifies as having left that movement, adhering to what he calls post-salafism. And he's written a book on the history of the movement. You may have seen the information on the Hadith, but you probably haven't seen that Yasir Qadhi in this interview is actually undermining the history of Islam, broadly speaking, saying that Islam is just a history of people adapting ideas, changing ideas, a cycle of going through jihadi movements and non-jihadi movements, political movements, everyone just changing everything all the time. Nothing actually goes back to the Prophet. There is no authentic strain of Islam, or as he would say, all strains of Islam are equally authentic. All streams of Islam are equally valid. No matter how much they contradict one another, they are all good. That is the position of Yasir Qadhi. Welcome, Mary. What would you say as introduction?
I would say that this actually, Yasir Qadhi's position provides more of a challenge for the Sunnis and the Shia, because the Shia base their confidence on the supposed infallibility of their Imam. So if their Imam has produced a Hadith, they don't rely on chains of narration or anything else. They just rely on this particular Imam having approved of it, and he's infallible, so they're good with it. Because of that. So there is a different epistemological standard. Now, on the Shia side, like, it's absolutely ridiculous if they think that their imams are infallible. They're not. They're just regular people, and they behave as regular people do in every way. But, and no, the ground did not split open and swallow up the poop. These are all silly later legends and things. But he really does destroy all Sunni Islam, because the basis of everything are on these supposed proofs developed in the context of Sunni scholars arguing with one another. And funnily enough, they took something that Jews were doing. They borrowed from the Jews because remember, where did they move to? They moved up to Mesopotamia, where there were large Jewish populations. And so they borrowed from Jews who were citing known scholars, but the Jews were not citing them as like proof that something is true. Just the weight of this person's authority goes on to this interpretation. But here they turned it into something different, that you can have this trustworthy person who supposedly heard from this trustworthy person who supposedly learned from this trustworthy person. So everything's trustworthy all the way through. It's turtles all the way down. You end up with Muhammad and Allah at the bottom. It's all good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But very idiosyncratic, very quirky kind of proof, because they don't have any intellectual history. They got dropped from being desert bandits into civilization and made up their own ways of thinking. Nobody else adopted it. Nobody else had it. Nobody else believed in it at any time, because it was always not a good basis for making sure of anything.
Excellent, excellent. Arlette up north, who used to go to the epic masjid where Yasir Qadhi preaches, says, I hated listening to Yaser at the mosque every week. I felt like my IQ dropped every time. LOL. And we'll actually get the viewpoint of Yasir Qadhi as it relates to teaching in the mosque here right at the beginning in the first clip, but I did want to take a couple other comments real quick before we get to that. Advocate Extra said, same guy trying to make a town in Texas. He isn't personally trying to make a town, but he is connected to the mosque that is trying to do so. It's really more like the project of the president of the mosque and a couple other individuals. Yaser just, because he's resident scholar, as his official title is at the mosque, he's tied into doing publicity for it. He sticks his foot in his mouth and tells the whole world, hey, we're doing this, we're bringing Sharia to Texas, and then they get themselves into some trouble. But in fairness, I don't think the project ever was going forward, whether or not Yasir Qadhi said anything, because it seems to be a financial blunder. That they had no idea what was actually involved with building a town. Had this amazing vision, but no foresight to hire someone who actually knew what they're doing or anything. So it did, from near as we could tell from our deep dive in that subject, probably was never going forward regardless. Allah, who would know best, says this guy is an apostate in denial. And certainly some Muslims would say that. What Yasir Qadhi, more than anything else, wants to make clear in this is that all Muslims are valid. Unlike those other movements, right? Unlike, literally every movement of Islam, basically, or every sect of Islam, saying the other guys are invalid. He says, no. They're all valid. Everyone's valid. It doesn't matter if you're a Sufi or a Shia or a Salafi, or you have some postmodern ideas, whatever. It's all good. It's all the same as long as you worship Allah. And we'll get into that as we go through some specific clips. But he readily admits that many Muslims would consider him apostate. And he's like, so what? Allah decides who's apostate and who is not. I guess we got Allah here deciding that. So there you go. All right, without further ado, let's dive into it. I've broken the long live stream. Well, I don't know if it was, no, it wasn't live because there's definitely some edits in it. But the long recorded call he had with small little academic Islamic channel. The total thing is a little over 2 hours long. A link to that is in the description. I've broken it down into 30-second segments that kind of capture the essence of what they're saying. Yasir Qadhi being very happy to file copyright claims. I didn't want to play the whole thing, but I also didn't want to play the whole thing because it's 2 hours, right? We'd be here literally all day if we played that. So I've broken it down, gotten the main points that he's making in 30-ish second segments on average. Play those through, and then we'll analyze them. The first one here is just kind of introduction. They've like said hi to him. And then Yasir Qadhi asks a question which kind of reveals a lot about who he is and what he stands for or doesn't stand for, as the case may be.
Now we can't hear it.
That is so weird. You definitely did not hear that. But
Yep.
all I did, I did not like on share it.
He tested this before. That's when
yeah,
we were
exactly.
late because we were testing everything.
I tested it. I put it on screen, tested it. Mary could hear it. It was going through to the audience. And then I took it off the screen, but I didn't on share it, so it shouldn't have had any effect. Whatever. Let's try again.
Just a quick question. My apologies, your channel is a bit new to me. My people just introduced me to it. The interview is coming from a faith-based paradigm, or is it more academically inclined? Just because the same question can be answered multiple ways depending on if you want prescriptive or descriptive answers. So that I'm aware, what is exactly your paradigm on the channel?
Well, our paradigm is more so academically inclined, if that helps.
Okay. So inshallah, try to be as neutral as possible and try to be fair.
So I don't know why he didn't ask this before they started recording, but thank you for not asking it before you started recording, because this really reveals a lot. He's like, I need to know how to answer the questions. Do you want the honest, fair answers, i.e. the academic answers? He even says that, right? When they say they want an academic answer, he's like, well, I'll be fair then. Or do you want the faith answer, right? Do you want what you're supposed to hear? So in other words, he's saying that in a setting talking to Muslims, he'll say something he knows is not true, or at least academia would say is not true. But in a different setting, he'll tell you the academic point of view. Your thoughts, Mary?
This really reveals his mind, because his mind is there is faith, which is unfair. It's not based in reality. It is other than what the facts would suggest. And then there is the fair and objective. And again, objective, subjective. He brought up objective. It's subjective, it's feelings based. And Yasir Qadhi is very clear that it's quite interesting. He shares the same definition of faith that Joseph Smith put into Mormonism, that faith is based on feelings and dedication against evidence. That is not what faith is in Christianity at all. Like the words that are used don't have that that kind of a meaning in the context of the Christian faith. So like semper fidelis, that always faithful. What does that mean? Does that mean always convincing yourselves of things in spite of the truth? No, it means that you are dedicated to what? To the thing that you hope for that hasn't shown up yet. So, I have hope that my husband is coming home today because he isn't here yet, but he always has before. He's very dependable. If something drastic doesn't happen, then he will, right? Doesn't like get hit on the road on the way home. He will be home today. And with God being more dependable and more faithful towards us, and the other meaning of the word faith, we can rely on his promises. So faith is the confidence that we have that the promises of God will be fulfilled based on all the evidence that we do possess. It is evidence-based. It's not fee-fees based. And something that Joseph Smith did that it was very interesting to me, that he got people like, don't you have faith? Don't you have faith? Have you already convinced yourself of this thing and then imagined it, is what he's asking people to do. And Yasir Qadhi similarly sees faith as something that is against evidence, against history, against objectivity, and against sense. And he's the one defining it this way.
Absolutely. Very interesting for sure. Timothy says, sounds like Islam is some weird Frankenstein version of whatever it was. originally. Yeah, I would say that is true. We can discuss and debate what parts are authentic, and Mary and I are certainly in the camp that there is a historical core, there's a historical basis. Muhammad is a real figure. He really said things. He really started this Islamic movement. But anyone that suggests all the doctrine of modern Islam goes back to Muhammad or something like that, honestly just has no idea what they are talking about. Tony said, "Why is Mary static?" She's not.
Well,
Maybe she was for a couple seconds.
Why aren't I? Well, also, why aren't I?
He might
today.
mean not moving. I was thinking audio had static, but
no.
What? Yeah, why are you not on camera, Mary?
I am not on camera because I'm going out later today, and I'm going to be basically running from here into the car with absolutely no time to spare. So
there you go. John says, "Where are the reason cats?" No cat here at the moment, but if one comes, we'll get the cat cam on. And Misha says to Alzoot, the like button. Yeah, okay. We'll go with that. Make sure to like this stream so that it can spread to others as Yasir Qadhi destroys Islam one
Who ate the apple?
idea at a time.
And please support Thaddeus if you feel led to, since this is not his full-time job and he always forgets to say that. And it's supposed to be his responsibility since this is his channel, but he doesn't do it. So he's going to starve to death because he doesn't ask.
Make sure to give me lots of apples. Yasir Qadhi's keyboard wants to know why so serious. Good question. And Jack triggered the apple. There's a historic rotten apple core of Islam. And as Mary says, make sure that I can buy lots of apples and get your donations in now. All right, we'll go to the next clip here, which I titled, "What is Salafism?" It's not exactly what the question is, but give you an idea what we're going to be looking at.
What are some of the defining characteristics of proto-Salafism amongst early Muslim scholars?
So you find certain characteristics that are pretty much universal throughout all manifestations of the movement. Of them is the primacy of the Quran and the Hadith, not the Sunnah, Hadith, because again, the equation of the books of Hadith with the Sunnah is itself even within Sunnism contested, right? Imam Malik had a perception of Sunnah, Abu Hanifa had a perception of Sunnah, and Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Shafi'i had a perception of Sunnah. And then the proto Ahl al-Hadith, or the proto-Salafi movement, equated the narrations of Hadith with the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and then equating it with the Quran. So giving Quran and the books of Hadith an almost equal weight. This is something that one finds in
Who ate the apple?
Manifestations of Salafism.
So Yasir Qadhi saying that the defining characteristic, and obviously this is open to debate, but in his opinion, the defining characteristic of Salafism is the primacy of the Quran and the Hadith, specifically elevating the Hadith to the same status as the Quran. And what he means by not the Sunnah, but rather the Hadith specifically, is because Sunnah can be used broader, right? It could include, for example, the biographies of Muhammad, and other Muslims, other sects of Muslims might value the biographies a lot higher than the Salafis. He's not saying that other people don't follow Hadith. He's just saying that the emphasis on Hadith is particular to Salafism in his opinion. Your thoughts, Mary?
Yeah, so his entire, I'm not sure what he thinks he's accomplishing here. He has left Salafism, which is authorism, which honestly is close. So the authory beliefs about Allah is closer to what the actual Salafs believed, because they were all anthropomorphists. Like Muhammad was an anthropomorphist. He taught that Allah had a body. He walked around. He saw things with his eyes. He heard things with ears. He just doesn't have a butthole because he doesn't need to eat and defecate, because he doesn't rely on anything, and he doesn't sleep. He is a huge human being who is identical to Adam. So in that way, do the Athari believe the same thing that the Salafi did? No. Are they the closest? Absolutely. They are the closest to what the original people believed. Are they closer in wanting, in the way that they tend to officially take positions on Sharia? Yes, as well. But honestly, the Ash'ari and Maturidi would get there too. Is the compilation of Sharia law the same as what Muhammad did? No, it's not. It's different in very specific ways. There are parts of Sunni Islam that come from the Sunnah of the Khalifa, that's singular. I'm going blank on the plural right now because my brain's fried. But anyway, on the caliphs. So from the caliphate, some of it is the Sunnah of Umar. The rulings on not selling the mothers of slaves is the Sunnah of Umar. Getting rid of muta marriage is the Sunnah of Umar, and the parts that try to claim that it's from Muhammad are parts of those ahadith that are clearly fabricated and are goofy and are silly and make no sense in the context of the narrative that the overall body of work presents. Now,
Yeah, and you'll get an opportunity.
So like, I don't see what he thinks he will accomplish here. I don't understand. Like, what's his goal?
Well, okay, so he's not trying to accomplish anything, right? He's trying to be honest about what the history of the Salafi movement is all about. He's not trying to say it's invalid. He's not trying to say that it's wrong. He will eventually talk about why he doesn't personally believe it, which turns out to be nothing theological at all. He just basically finds it no longer useful. His idea is that Islam should adapt and change to the culture of the time, and the Salafi ideas don't address modern concerns. That's what he turns out.
Which branch of Islam does?
Right, which no Islam does, right? That's why I said that he's undermining all of Islam.
So my question is, again, what does he hope to accomplish? Like the Ash'ari and Maturidi, they'll get to the same place. They just take a little longer to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't get what he thinks his point is, other than it's kind of embarrassing when Muslims blow themselves up in places, and that they need to wait for their caliph to tell them that they need to kill people. Like, mm-hmm. I don't get.
Well, I mean, he's actually going to agree with a large portion of what you just said. He's actually going to address the idea that God is anthropomorphic. He's going to be talking about jihadi movements. He's going to say that, you know, they happen in all sects of Islam, right? He doesn't seem to know why, but any case, yeah, you'll have an opportunity to discuss all those things as we go through these clips, super chats from Songs of Relief.
Brothers and sisters, why to lose this great opportunity? Remember, when the person is on his deathbed, the last minute, he will ask Allah Jalla wa Ala to be delayed for 1 second to do what? Not to pray, not to do other things, but to give sadaqah, because sadaqah you can give it just like this, yeah, in 1 second.
And Songs of Relief only took about 1 second after Mary spoke to say, "Don't starve." By the way, did you listen to Sal's new song featuring you, Muta Men Lols? I did. I love that song. It's super awesome. If you have not seen that, you can find a link to it on my community post. Or just stay tuned for my second live stream later today. That will be a portion of it, not the whole thing, but a portion of it will be my new introduction for the Hotel Hijab saga, which I'll be talking about with Chris from Speaker's Corner later today in the second live stream of the day. So thank you for that donation. And Yasir Qadhi's keyboard said, Allah ate the apple. Indeed he did. Indeed he did. So our next clip here. So he said that he actually had two defining characteristics of Salafism. One is the emphasis on the Hadith and the Quran as opposed to the broader category of Sunnah. And then the second distinctive characteristic of Salafism is what he's talking about in this next clip.
One of the hallmarks of all Salafi movements is the rejection of Kalam in toto. They are not interested in the principles and the maxims that are derived from Kalam. They're not interested in bodies and accidents and the cosmological Kalam argument for the existence of God and its repercussions on the divine attributes, and hence, based upon that, the understanding of the divine attributes in light of the repercussions of the Kalam cosmological arguments.
So Qadhi says the other distinctive characteristic of Salafism is the rejection of Kalam. Now, you might not be familiar with what that term means exactly. Kalam is an Islamic philosophical term. It's what they use to describe what we would call the dialectic method, or a
No,
attempt
not
to come.
dialectic. Just
Well, okay, an attempt to come to the truth by means of logical argument. And he says Salafis reject that. They read the scripture, they see what's written there, and they say, we believe that. We don't know what it means, but we believe it. That is his statement.
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with no, it has nothing to do with dialectics. That's Hegelianism, which is bunk anyway. No, it's about logic, and Kalam means speech. Dialectic kind of means to speech, so it's connected by like this deep etymological thing, but Kalam has nothing to do with dialectics. It has nothing to do with separating.
Okay, well, forget that term.
But
I mean,
but no, it means logical argumentation.
Yeah.
So they reject
I would call
human
that
logic. Okay, that's what you meant. You did not mean the word dialectic that you said. Like you meant something else. You meant logic.
I meant logical argument towards the truth.
Yes, dialectics are not logical, and they're trash. But anyway, not spending time bashing Hegel, but going to the idea. So basically, allowing any space at all for natural theology is antithetical to, well, it was antithetical to Muhammad's Islam. So I understand why they would do that. Now, the fact that they think that they're arriving at something without argumentation is absolutely ridiculous, because of course they're arguing about everything. So they can say that Muhammad's Allah does not leave any space for mankind thinking, like that human thought will arrive at anything meaningful, in the same way that you cannot say that causality is that anything that happens is caused by anything other than Allah taking an action. All of the surviving branches of Sunni Islam that have not been stamped out through mass murder actually agree on this. Even the ones that accept Kalam and logical argumentation in abstract reject causality, which is, I don't know how you do both of these things. But the actual application of logic in Islam is always poor, because it's coming from trying to rationalize the stuff that Muhammad said. What the Athari arrive at is not a God that is all that different from the Ash'ari Maturidi God. He just has some extra characteristics, and some of them happen to be things that sound an awful lot like body parts. But the Ash'ari and Maturidi, who say that Allah has knowledge, seeing, and hearing, also, as distinct attributes, are also relying more on what Muhammad taught than on the faculty of logic, because anyone with logic would understand that seeing requires a dependence on light, hearing requires a dependence on a medium through which sound propagates. And if you actually mean actual seeing and actual hearing as intrinsic attributes of Allah, he has a dependence on light and a medium through which sound waves propagate. They didn't understand that things like void was a thing, that there are places where there are mediums through which sound cannot propagate. Like, ancient people didn't know this, and they didn't know that light was something that you receive and not necessarily something that you're shooting out from your eyeballs. Muhammad had the common idea that light was like, I'm not sure quite how they understood it, but like your vision was using light to like shoot out and grasp at things, and then it comes back to you. Stuff comes out from your eyeball and then comes back to you again. That's why Muhammad thought that if you prayed while looking up to the sky, like Allah will grab your sight from you when it goes away and it can't come back and you'll be blind. Like, but these are things that this establishes the being of Allah as something that is not coherent and logical in any branch of Sunni Islam. You don't have an Allah that actually makes logical sense. And you also don't have an Allah that you're not arguing about logically. So they're all in the outs. He's not saving anything. He's not helping anybody. He's not making it more rational. He's not making it more tenable. He's not making it more sensible by taking this stance. He's not helping. And he thinks he is. It's so sad.
Well, again, he's not necessarily trying to help. He's just saying that Salafis reject logic, right? That's what he's actually saying is that one of the fundamental things, and not true of all Muslims. He's going to, or he argues, he says, numerous other groups use this, and that's true, right? But Salafis that reject
but
logic.
My point was that I talked about the other branches, the Ash'ari and Maturidi. It doesn't help them any. And well, I think that the issue is he really thinks that he is in a position to like save Islam somehow. Its reputation, intellectually, its position, get it set in the world. So I do think he sees himself as a kind of big brain, I can help the Ummah kind of guy. I really do. So that's why he does this, right? He's not doing this because he's like, well, I just have to admit our religion's stupid. No, he thinks he's helping.
Well, he's also promoting his book. In fairness, he's also promoting his book, which is written on the history of Salafism, and he's demonstrating his knowledge about Salafism to help promote the book as well. So the next clip is on Ibn Taymiyyah, which is often seen as the founder of the Salafi movement.
This is really important. Ibn Taymiyyah also contributed. Now this is contentious because Salafis don't want to say this. And it took me a while to even come to terms a few years ago or 10 years ago to really admit this fact, because it's awkward. Salafism likes to believe it's existed like a diamond from the time of Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhu. It's literally been there the whole time, exactly unchanged. The book demonstrates that's not the case. So to claim that Ibn Taymiyyah carved the diamond, shaped the diamond didn't exist before Ibn Taymiyyah, and even the diamond we have today is not the one Ibn Taymiyyah shaped. To claim that goes against the main thesis of Salafism, but that's a factually correct statement.
So what he's saying here is that Salafis will say that, this has been true Islam from the very start. Some Muslims might have moved away, but there's always been this core of Muslims that believed exactly what we believe. And Yasir Qadhi is saying, no. Even Ibn Taymiyyah, he was innovating. He was creating new ideas. He and we'll get into some of the specifics here in a minute, but he was creating new ideas, and Islam was evolving, and it's evolved since then. What we follow isn't the same thing as he followed. Every Muslim, we all follow different things. We've all been innovating. We've all been bid'ah from the very start. That's what his idea here is. Your thoughts?
So early Islam had ideas that were, before there was a formulation of a philosophical school, everybody was walking around, they were anthropomorphists. They had very little understanding of these stories and of Allah. You don't ask, where was Allah before he created heavens and the earth and the earths? You don't ask that question unless you believe that Allah is a bodily being in space. And you don't answer that question with, he was in the mists above the clouds, above the water, or in the clouds above the water, unless you also think that. Muhammad thought Allah was a corporeal being. The earliest collection of Hadith, the earliest tafsir, is no longer used because the guy took this too literally. He didn't say that he had a human body. but his explanations of things were very obvious, that he knew that Muhammad taught about an embodied Allah who could walk around because he had feet that moved and arms that moved and everything else. And in the same way, you go to Ibn Ishaq, some of the things that were taken out by later revisions are specifically about how Muhammad believed that he was embodied. Al-Tabari's history has many hadith that got purged. Why? Because they talked about all of Muhammad's stories that made it extraordinarily clear that he believed that Allah looked just like Adam before Adam was shrunken down, except he didn't have a digestive tract and a butthole. That's who Allah was to Muhammad. The reason why no one will accept this and that they have to innovate is because it's so stupid that as soon as you come out of the desert and you talk to other people and they go, ha ha ha, you taught that? And he says he has the God of Abraham. Oh my goodness, you guys are idiots. It is the mockery and the embarrassment, once you get educated, the embarrassment of such a clearly pagan idea of this embodied God that makes everyone reject this over time. Now, what was Ibn Taymiyyah trying to do? What were other people trying to do? They wanted to go, wait, so, we had the Mu'tazilites who really used a lot of logic and everything else. The first revolution against them was mainstream Islam stamping out this idea that made Allah actually make some sense. They're like, no, he doesn't make sense in our sources. We can't have this thing that makes him make sense. We can't do this. He makes too much sense. This sensible Allah does not work with what Muhammad taught. Let's go to what Muhammad taught. So Ibn Taymiyyah is in the tradition of people who went from one extreme of, oh my goodness, this thing that we believe is so humiliating and obviously can't be true. Let's hit it with the logic stick, and now it's unrecognizable. No, we have to actually believe what Muhammad believed, so let's make these meet. Salafism is one of the efforts to try to make Allah make some kind of defensible sense, even though they say they're not using logic. They really are using argumentation because everybody does, and they're trying to make it meet in the continuum between what Muhammad taught and what the Ismailis believe and the Mu'tazilites believe on the extremes that are very, very far from what he taught. Is Salafism and all of its various versions closer to Muhammad? Yeah. In law, not really, because Muhammad gave legal rulings based on whatever was convenient at the moment, and he made things up and he made exceptions. Like, he did say extreme things, but then immediately never enforced them. Like, all of his strict rules were almost never enforced, and people were running around having tons of adultery, having tons of intercourse with boys, and they were almost never punished because the two things existed together. And in the legal sense, the Asharis and Maturidis are more in line with Muhammad. In the metaphysical sense, the Salafis are in line with more with Muhammad's actual practices.
Got a couple comments from the audience here. Songs of Relief says that's quite a mission. It was indeed quite an admission from Yasir Qadhi that Islam is nothing but innovation or adaptation, as he would call it, but that it is not like some unchanging thing from the 7th century, straight from Allah to Muhammad to us, right? He's saying that human beings have changed it and continue to change it to this day. I presume that Claudio here is a Muslim. Why do all Christian apologists love Yasir Qadhi? Because of desperation? Well, I don't love Yasir Qadhi. I think he's a disgusting, disingenuous individual. But the reason we are looking at this is because he is giving an academic, truthful presentation to to a fair degree, right? To a good degree, he's giving an accurate, fair representation of Islamic history. And Islamic history is not what you believe. It's certainly not this. We have golden chains going back to a Hadith and Quran. No Muslim will take you serious, brother. You are very ignorant. You think that all Muslims are just like you, that they are Salafis who just blindly believe everything. No, Islam is very diverse globally. Your beliefs are not the Islamic beliefs. They're just one of many different ideas of what Islam is, which is part of what Yasir Qadhi is saying. But he's saying neither your ideas nor any of the other ideas are what Muhammad taught. Islam is the religion that human beings have continually changed since the time of Muhammad. That is Yasir Qadhi's point, and he is absolutely correct on that. Why are you criticizing things which goes against you? Okay, first of all, I'm not criticizing anything. Second of all, nothing that we've discussed goes against Christianity in any way. If our standards were applied to your literature, unfortunately, there would be nothing left. No, your standard is it has to have an authentic chain. The authentic chain of the Gospel of John, I'm going to give it to you. Pay close attention. It's going to be really hard. John. Yeah, the author of the book wrote the words down. Oh my gosh, that's a terrible method of doing things. You got to pass it on for 20 generations before you write it down. That's how you get reliable truth.
I know, right?
Stupid. So stupid. So according to your methodology, or at least what you think your methodology is, if Muhammad wrote something, you would not believe it. You'd say, no way, that is not from Muhammad. We need to have a long chain of people that it went for 200 plus years before anyone wrote down, or else we can't believe it. That's your logic. And just so you know, I'm not reasoning at all, because I say that Islam is defined by a certain set of theological criteria, which are not found in the Quran. And Jalala here says, no, I define what Islam is. And if the five pillars are not found in the Quran, that means that they're not Islam. Okay.
Yep.
Hey, you've got a religion of one, buddy. You've created your own religion. You call it Islam.
Yep, and he admits it. He's like, everybody else, all the other Muslims, they're not actually Muslims. I'm the only Muslim in the world. It's just me. It's so funny.
Yeah, so I don't know why you want to claim the term Islam so much, buddy. It's not like a well-respected term. Just call yourself Quranist or call yourself a Jalalist if you're being really honest. But there's no point in calling yourself Muslim, because you don't believe what Muslims believe. Which is okay, right? You're allowed to believe something different. Just don't claim the term. That'd be like me saying I'm a Muslim. I'm a Muslim. Why? Because I define what Islam is. No, that's just dumb, right? I define Islam as believing in the Trinitarian God and that Jesus atones for your sins, and you attain eternal life by placing your trust in Jesus and Jesus alone and the completed work that he did on his cross. This is true Islam. So if that's not what you believe, you're not a Muslim. That's exactly what you're doing, buddy. It's just dumb. Just call yourself something different. Why claim a term that you don't actually believe? All right. So this next one, you thought that was bad. And this next one, he's going to tell you that Ibn Taymiyyah changed the definition of Tawhed.
These ideas are seminal to modern Salafism. They didn't exist pre-Ibn Taymiyyah. Number one, the tripartite definition of Tawheed. Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, Uluhiyyah, Asma' al-Sifat. Ibn Taymiyyah is the first to mainstream this entire concept.
Yep. Like Ibn Taymiyyah redefined the word Tawheed. He did, absolutely. So what he's saying is that the idea of Tawheed is unity. It actually means unification, but Ibn Taymiyyah used it differently to mean unity. So he changed the seminal definition and everything else of Allah's lordship, of his power, that it's all in unity, and that his attributes and names are in unity, and they're all like what? Yeah, no one said that before Ibn Taymiyyah. He totally made that up. It's new. No one used the word Tawheed in Muhammad's day at all. Tawheed itself as a term. There's one hadith with the word Tawheed. Muhammad didn't say it. It's a fabrication. Was a borrowing from the Christians that they were in contact with to use a term that is a philosophical term that described how the Oriental Orthodox Christians believed God, Jesus existed in the unification of divinity and humanity. The Oriental Orthodox really wanted to stress that in the incarnation, you cannot separate divinity from humanity, that they are truly united in one. They did not say that the divinity became humanity or the humanity became divinity or they got mixed up like a blender, but that the union was so great that there was that you, when you speak of the Son of God in the incarnation, you are not speaking of the divinity of the Son of God to the exclusion of the humanity. When you say Son of God, the person, you are saying the person who has the humanity and divinity united, Tewahedo, the Ethiopian Tewahedo Church, in him. The cognate of this word was used by people who spoke Aramaic and Ethiopic to describe the incarnation. Muslims went and rummaged through our words, our terminology, and took this term. Now, you can borrow words and redefine them to your own purposes. That is entirely legitimate as long as you're honest that you're not using the word in the same way. It gets dishonest whenever you're pretending that you're using it in the same way, but you're really not. They are using the term, they first use the term to refer to the true union of Allah's attributes. That his different, separate, distinct, ontologically apart attributes are truly united in his being, which somehow does not have its own ontological existence. But that union, what Allah is the perfect union of those attributes. That was the source of this word. And then Ibn Taymiyyah goes and pretends that it means something else and somehow pretends it's not related to using logic or philosophy, which is just goofy. Because it is a philosophical word that was borrowed from Christians to try to describe Allah in a way that Muhammad didn't describe him, but in a way that was logically coherent. That was the point.
And don't miss the importance of what Yasir Qadhi is saying here. So every Dawah guy will tell you that the primary argument or reason why you should believe in Islam is because Tawheed is so simple, it's so obvious, every Muslim believes this. And what Yasir Qadhi is saying is, no, Muslims disagree on what Tawheed means, right? They disagree on who God is. They have different conceptions of God. They have different understandings. It's not simple. Many have complex ideas. And not only that, what the Salafis are pushing, which is most the Dawah guys, is in no way goes back to Muhammad. He says it originates with Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah, I should have said this earlier, but he is late 13th, early 14th century, so 600 plus years after the time of Muhammad. And he's defining the fundamental doctrine of Islam in the way he's defining it for the first time ever, right, in the history of Islam.
Yes, this was not taught by Muhammad. This was not thought of until his point. No one ever articulated that way, and no one ever thought of it that way. He was taking something, again, that was swiped from Christians, used to describe a philosophical idea about Allah, and saying that, no, it describes this other philosophical idea about Allah that previous Muslims had never heard of. They would not be familiar with. Muhammad would just look at you like you'd lost your mind and would not agree with you.
Absolutely. Super chat from Tony Holly.
We're asking you to give a loan to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and believe me, that will be paid back in ways you can never imagine.
Who is it that would loan Allah a goodly loan so he may multiply it for him many times over?
Allahu Akbar. I love that verse. Every time we donate to projects, we're giving a loan to our Creator, the most generous, who will return it to us in this life.
Brothers and sisters, can you afford to miss out on this opportunity?
Thank you very much for that extremely generous donation there, Tony, with no comment, just got filled in with the default there. Just a pure donation, no comment whatsoever. And obviously, believe me, Allah is going to pay you back, just like he protected Muhammad from being poisoned by a Jewish lady who gave him lamb after Muhammad slaughtered her family. He definitely is going to pay you back. He's not going to just leave you in pain for 3 years and then you die a humiliating death or anything. He's definitely going to be rewarding you very generously for your very generous donation to the ministry.
Thank you very much, Tony. We really appreciate it.
All right, so next up, we got another innovation. So he says there's 3 innovations of Ibn Taymiyyah. The first was Tawhed. The second is on the attributes of God, and we got a couple clips on this. First one here.
This leads to number 2, which is Ibn Taymiyyah's unique understanding of Asma' Sifat, of the divine attributes. It is quite clear, and actually advanced Salafi students know this, that pre-Ibn Taymiyyah there was a spectrum of how to understand the attributes. Some of the Hanabila were actually very anthropomorphic, right? Such as Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la. It's basically almost bordering on giving God corporeal, God sits on the throne. The throne creaks when God sits on it.
So he says that there's a diversity of thought before Ibn Taymiyyah, but he doesn't say it directly, but he's kind of implying that the dominant understanding in Islam before that was that it was basically physical body parts. Basically,
yeah, just to be clear, not in Islam, but in the pre-Salafi stream, basically.
Right. Yeah. So the Hanbali school specifically, because that's what it grows out of. But within Hanbali Islam anyway, that the dominant idea is that it is physicality, basically a giant human being in the sky. They might deny it, right? They might say that's not what we believe, but that is actually what they believe. So they might deny it on paper, but that's how they're thinking about things. Your thoughts?
So yes, that is, and again, early Muslims who walked with Muhammad, every single one of them would have thought that Allah has a body. The only reason they moved away from Allah as a corporeal being is because it was ridiculous to anyone who was educated. So once they got educated, they had to go, oh, I believe in this Islam thing, but I'm not an idiot. So what am I going to do? What am I going to do about it? And I'm going to talk to Mel here for a moment of Islamic origins. You guys keep misrepresenting me, to be clear. Okay, let me explain.
Yeah, before you answer, Mary, I just want to say something real quick. Yeah. So we're looking at Yasir Qadhi's whole talk, which is mostly on the history of Islam and how it's constantly innovating and changing. The Hadith, although that's what people have highlighted, is only a very small portion of it. We're actually looking at the whole talk.
Yep.
But you also are misrepresenting Mary, and she'll now explain that.
Okay, so a lot of you guys, no, sweetie, that's not how things work. Okay, a lot of these guys draw this hard line. There are 2 buckets. There's one bucket where you're going to believe every hadith. You're going to believe the hadith methodology. You're going to believe everything that Muslims say about the hadith. You're going to believe the things that people make up about Muhammad in the 20th century and in the 19th century and make up about Mecca in the 20th century and 19th century. No one does that except for Muslims. But I know, Mel, that you're not on the extreme side. Jay absolutely explicitly will put all of this together. That if there is falseness, if there are lies, if there's this, then the whole thing is bunk. Now, my argument, and I'm not upset at you. I'm just enthusiastic, okay? Just to be clear, I'm not upset. I'm enthusiastic. I'm an enthusiastic person, okay? So, how I want to treat the Islamic materials is like I would treat any other source with this kind of background. I want to analyze it in its context and look at its actual content. Not what people say about it, right? Not what people, and who did they say that they got it from originally? Because of accusations that certain religious groups within Islam are like making stuff up. So it's like, oh, we better check this stuff. Somebody says it comes from Muhammad, we need to do some checking. But the idea of an entire chain of narration, that's late. It's fabricated. They're altered, they're doctored, they're massaged. Anytime you need a hadith for judicial rulings, they'll fix it. Somebody somewhere will come up with one that's sahih because it's a useful hadith. You need it for Sharia, so it's gonna be polished up. Whereas something that they don't use for Sharia might be a nice one. It might have gotten one applied to it that's nice. Might be total bunk. It's not because you need it. So what I want to do is to look at the context, the content of these, and locate what it's actually saying, who these people really are, what their individual beliefs are, if it's reconstructible from this. What's their personality? And a lot of times you can get all of these details from these ahadith, and you can come up with networks of things that Muslims have never put together because they don't look at them as coming from essentially a group of human beings through human processes. So what I want to apply is normal historical techniques to these testimonies or presumed testimonies or asserted testimonies. Does it fit into the overall narrative? Where does this narrative take place? Does it really take place in this location? What is it actually saying? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you always run into when you pay attention to what's actually saying, again, is this embodied God. Muhammad believed. Every early source portrays Allah as an enormous, phenomenally huge, unspeakably large, human man-shaped being who doesn't eat, doesn't have a digestive tract, and doesn't sleep. Like that's what he is. And that's so important because that explains all the fights and the weird stuff and the divisions and everything else that you have in later Islam. Because how do you go from your God being a giant stomping around in space to a religion that can be an imperial religion that people can take seriously and talk about seriously? And you do that by trying to rationalize this very ridiculous, irrational religion. And that's the process that Yasir Qadhi is trying to criticize. But he won't admit what the original is. He won't admit that the original, Muhammad is going around telling everyone about an Allah who stomps around and sits on a creaking throne. He won't tell people this. He won't admit it because it destroys Islam. Right?
We did have some tech issues there. I think it was probably a couple unrelated things. So my headphones randomly disconnected, my wireless headphones disconnected. So I went ahead and switched to the wired headphones, but the audience said that you cut out for a second. I don't know, because I didn't have headphones on.
Sorry.
But no worries. I think that was only just a couple seconds. So I think we're going.
I guess I lagged and then it sped me up really fast.
Yeah. So in any case, we do now have Artemis joining us. You guys were asking for the cat cam, and she saw the donations coming in and decided to oblige. So welcome, Artemis, to the stream. I don't know if this was said before she was actually on stream or not. We demand the cut. You ask and you shall receive, apparently. She literally just showed up. I saw her coming in and I was like motioning to her to come on over, and she did. All right. So we got, just real quick, I had it up there earlier, but Mel from Islamic Origins did say that he was playing and he was taking
and I know,
unrealistic
but
hard line. And I just wanted to make it clear. I just wanted to make it clear that he wasn't like really being critical. But I'm glad you got the opportunity to explain your position nonetheless.
And here's the thing. I want other people to think about how else you come up with what Islam is now, with its silliness and weirdness and everything else. Now, okay, if you want to say, for example, that the Massalian movement, which was this weird heretical Christian hermetic movement, influenced Islam, I'd say sure. It very likely there's a piece of it that like went into popular culture that may have done that, because the Massalians were weirdos who decided that God had a body too, right? Like they were never recognized. They were like this weird popular movement of these weird hermits who went out and stood in the desert till they got heat stroke and did freaky mystical practices to try to get visions of God, because they decided that the God, the Father, is embodied, and so they could do this. They were, never recognized. They were considered. They were, and at times, like explicitly cast out of the church. They were not able to partake in communion because they were weirdos doing weird things with their own weird little tiny cult in the desert. And they were in the desert toward the south of Syria, where possibly people interact with them. So if you want to say that they influenced it, I'm with you. They may have. If Bashir existed at all, our buddy, the supposed monk, that's what he would have been. Everything that's said about him is silly, but that's what he would have been, one of these weirdos who thinks that God has a body. But from that, we have a core teaching of this embodied God that is in all the early Islamic sources, and it's so consistent and so clear and so comprehensible, and it has such explanatory power that you can't get away from it really being taught by a historical Muhammad, because this would not be what any imperial power would have wanted to start with, and then have to reject and distort and turn away and soften and play with and come up with these ridiculous rhetorical devices to get away from this fundamental bedrock teaching from the religion that evolved into the imperial branches of Islam.
So, at the risk of making Mary talk even more, Cargo Crew earlier said this.
Yep, on Friday.
I was either going to bring it up at the end, or now, if you want to hear more about Mary's understanding of Hadith and early Islam and how we know it has a historical element, not that everything said is historical. She's debating Robert Spencer on the question of whether Muhammad exists this coming Friday. Definitely. I don't know if Hatun has posted that or not, but it will be on Hatun's channel, DCCI Ministries. I'll certainly post a link here. Definitely encourage everyone to check that out.
And I want to point out that you can prove that the Old Testament God, references to his hand or whatever, were metaphorical to those people when you look at the conflict between Ezra and the priests of Baal, where Ezra was making fun of their God who could be represented by an idol by saying, maybe he's thinking, maybe he's asleep, maybe he's going to the bathroom. Why is he doing those specific things about their God? Because their God can be represented by an idol, and because he has hands, has feet, has these body parts, he's an embodied being in their minds. Wherever else he is in time and space, this is a correct, appropriate representation of him. So, nope, Robert Spencer is definitely not scared to debate me. He's debated tons and tons of people. I have never done a formal debate in my life. So I'm sure he's quite confident.
And I wouldn't say Mary's scared, but she's definitely putting a lot of effort into preparation.
I take it very seriously because debates are their own thing.
Mhm.
Like, if you are giving a speech, it's its own thing. If you're giving a debate, it's its own thing. If you're having an argument, it's its own thing. If you're giving an exegetical preaching, that's its own thing. They're all skills. And yes, you may have contents, but to express them in a way that like enters people's brains in a helpful fashion is its own skill. And it's not one that I have developed. It's something that, of course, Robert Spencer, having done many debates, has a lot of experience at, and I have none. So you're getting me as the kid on a bike and dad just let go, and I'm going to do my best. But that is what I am.
Mm-hmm. You do have one advantage, though, and that's that you're correct. So Misha SWV said, I now know why Ezra hid behind the Gaka tree. The prophets of Baal were after him. Indeed. All right. So we got another clip here on the attributes of Allah.
I can't hear it. Can you guys hear it?
No,
they don't. They haven't heard it yet, but
no. They definitely did not hear it. This time it makes perfect sense because I had to switch headphones, and it's dependent on having the correct speaker the correct set of speakers from as of when you shared it, right? It doesn't change. So it was getting the audio being played to my headphones, which are no longer connected. All right, so let's try that again.
But if you're going to have something as blasphemous as this, please, put a footnote or whatever. But the point is, that's Abu Ya'la. You have on the other side Ibn Qudama, who is very much in line with a type of relegation of the meaning of the attributes. We don't even know what istiwa means. We don't even know what yad means, which is basically a version of Ash'arism, right?
So he says the dominant strand, he doesn't use the term dominant, but he seems to imply it's the dominant strand was a type of anthropomorphic belief. But then he says on the other side, you got people who say, we have no idea what any of these terms mean, right? Allah has hands, but we have no idea what hands are.
Yad, yad is hand. And here's the thing. Would anyone say we don't know what hand means if you weren't starting out with a God who had a body and you just don't want to accept that?
Mm-hmm.
That is my point. This is an embodied God. It was embarrassing. So all of Islam has turned their back on what Muhammad taught and made something else. Now let's talk about hand in the Bible. It has always been understood as God's power and occasionally, specifically, the activity of the sun. That's consistent. It's understandable. It's comprehensive. And throughout the Bible, you can point to that and go, yeah, that's it. It makes perfect sense. That's what's meant. But you can't say that about Islam. Why? Because they're borrowing from a lot of these weird sources that were rabbinical, that have a truth, and combining it with Muhammad's ideas, the heavenly man theme from these weird Gnostic-y rabbinical sources and Allah saying that Adam is special because I made him with my own hands. Allah putting his hand on the back of Adam. These aren't abstractions about power. If Adam is super special because he was made with Allah's two hands, who isn't super special?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone who isn't made with his two hands. And only if he gets caught out like, we don't think God has actual hands. He might flub something at the moment and throw something at the moment that's contradictory. But Muhammad believes that Allah has hands with fingers and arms, and his hands are right hands in the sense that there's nothing impure about him. But I wouldn't even say that that's like a super literal statement in that way, that his hands are all pure and good. He doesn't have a hand that he wipes his butt with, like that kind of thing, right? that's the point.
Yeah, like so the right hands, two right hands specifically, that could definitely be a metaphor saying they're both pure, but it would mean his literal right hand and his literal left hand are both pure, right? It wouldn't mean
Right,
that he
right.
doesn't have hands.
That's what it means. Yeah.
So Morgie asked what the blasphemous part was. So he goes through some of the descriptions of, physical law. I'm not 100% sure what he said immediately before that, but basically just the idea of taking Allah as a physical being is what he's describing as blasphemous. He might be referring to people describing Allah as a young boy without a beard. I'm not 100% certain about that, but the general idea is the first set of Muslims are the ones that are being blasphemous in Yasir Qadhi's opinion. We've got a third clip on attributes.
Every Salafi post Ibn Taymiyyah, therefore, only looks at the divine attributes through the lens of Ibn Taymiyyah and discards other earlier connotations. An interesting anecdote here. It is quite clear that the early Hanabila, including Ahmad ibn Hanbal, assumed or believed that God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will place the Prophet Muhammad on the throne. This is a quite standard Hanbali belief. And Abu Dawood, the student of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, actually affirms this, and he says Ahmad ibn Hanbal also had this belief that God shall sit him on the throne on the Day of Judgment next to him.
That still sounds like shirk there, that Muhammad is Allah's partner. But
Yep.
his actual point is that
Allah has a physical throne.
Hanbal himself, as well as the Hanbali school in general, felt that Allah had a physical throne. He was a physical being, and he'd pick up the physical Muhammad and put him on the physical throne sitting next to Allah so that they could be partners in the Day of Judgment. Okay. But his point is that Salafis will say that this is this idea is not early Islam, that they're going back to Islam, but they're actually getting it from Taymiyyah, who is the one who popularizes these ideas. He may not have invented all of them, but he popularized the Salafi conception of God as of today that they have today.
Right. And why would Ibn Hanbal say that? Because toward the end of his life, Muhammad was trying to steal more and more things from Jesus. And why would you put him on the throne? Because the people following him were like, oh, well, he gets all of these prerogatives. Christ is on the throne. The Lamb is on the throne with the Father. Why? Because he's God. And this is a vision. It's a vision. Our God is not a literal lamb with a bunch of eyeballs and horns and scary stuff. No, this is a vision, not literal, but they're sticking Muhammad there because, oh, well, if Jesus is on the throne, we're going to stick Muhammad there instead. Again, stealing from Christians. Was this something that Muhammad himself taught? No. No, they interpreted Muhammad saying that perhaps he will be put in a high position, which was just this general promise to Muhammad that he will be given rewards in the afterlife. Then Muhammad himself started embroidering this, saying, oh, the wonderful things I'm going to get this reward and that reward and this other reward. And then people coming after him, further embroidering on this and legendarizing this. Like, oh, well, one of his by being put in a high position, that means that he's going to be on the throne with Allah, because what else could be higher? So you can see how this developed, and also know that it's not something that Muhammad himself said. They're stealing from the Christians. They're stealing from Christ. Just like the Shia did. The Shia who have turned Aryan Christianity and just relabeled it and Gnosticized it more and made Muhammad in place of Christ. Like, again, you can see where this comes from. It has its historical context. He's right. None of it comes from Muhammad directly. But it does come from things that are recognizable.
Rory says, sorry I'm late. How are you both? Doing great. And better late than never. Glad you're here. And now there was one other.
Muhammad was an early LLM. That's
I said that. I was going to bring that up a little bit later, but you already highlighted it. Hussein says the angels carried the throne. Yeah, that is correct. Very physical throne there. And as Mary spoiled for you.
I'm sorry.
Monk Fu Bar says Muhammad was an early LOM. Yep, he's just taking words and combining them and had no conception of what they actually means. I think that that's actually a great analogy for Muhammad. So question from Roy, do you think Yasir Qadhi will become an unbeliever like us according to the Islamic version? No, I think that he will justify in his mind, and he explains this kind of throughout the talk, that, whatever you believe, as long as you believe in Allah, and we can't even actually define that because Tawhed is in question. Later he'll say Shirk is in question. We have no idea, or Muslims can disagree on these things. They just need to worship Allah and try to be a good person, and then they go to heaven, is what he's going to say at the end of it, to spoil it. And as long as that's what he thinks Islam is, then I think that he can just continually justify whatever he wants to believe.
And very quickly, LLM is a large language model. It's an AI that's basically looking at word patterns and takes from existing things and pastes in what is the most next likely word given the context. So it's making fun of Muhammad for mixing up and spitting out things he heard without understanding them. It's hilarious.
Indeed. All right. So as I said, Yasir Qadhi has three things that he believes that Ibn Taymiyyah brought to Islam. The first was the modern understanding of Tawhed. The second was, at least within the Salafis. And then the second was the understanding of Allah's attributes, again, within Salafi movement. And then the third is the lordship of Allah. He doesn't actually explain this one very well, so we may need Mary's help here, but let's get the clip first.
One of the key contributions to Ibn Taymiyyah, which is going to shape Wahhabism, Ibn Abdul Wahhab's theology, is the distinction between God's existence and lordship and between God's rights to be worshipped, uluhiyya, and the problematization of rituals that were becoming fairly mainstream in the time of Ibn Taymiyyah. So standing at long periods of time in front of the graves and believing the graves of the righteous exude barakah, and praying to Allah at the graves and traveling to visit the graves. This was becoming fairly normative in the time of Ibn Taymiyyah.
So this is the only example he gives. I don't know if that's his entire point, but he's saying that practices that are becoming normative in worship were kind of ended by Ibn Taymiyyah, visiting graves, worshiping at graves.
Well, they weren't ended. They were just condemned.
Well, yes, true. Fair enough. They were condemned. They were said, this isn't Islam. And he says that Ibn Taymiyyah brought in this distinction between worship and the existence or lordship of Allah. I'm not sure if he just means like forbidding certain practices or if he means something different. What do you think, Mary?
So what he's saying is that the unification of Allah's lordship was something invented by Taymiyyah to explain why because all power rests with Allah, all lordship rests with Allah, then all worship or reverence should be directed to Allah alone. And this is something invented by Ibn Taymiyyah, but that doesn't mean that, it was a reaction to things that were developing in Islam, and they developed in other religions too. So the criticism of doing those sorts of things actually does come from Muhammad. That's a legit Mohammedan criticism because it's in the Quran. And we can be certain that the Quranic text as it is today was more or less fully canonized by the end of the 7th century, and also that what we have did come from Muhammad, along with who knows how much was lost. But what we have did come from Muhammad, and that was a criticism of Muhammad. So he has this new articulation, this completely new theology that kind of systematized this criticism, But yeah, it did come from Muhammad. And here's the thing. Every cult is a little right about something, and sometimes fairly right about a number of things. Every cult is. Hilariously enough, Mormonism initially got a good part of its support because it was anti-Masonic, even though it turned completely Masonic later. I know this is so weird. It was initially promoted as an anti-Masonic religion, and this Masonism has pervaded and seeped into the churches, and it's demonic and evil. Come to us, we're the pure people, and we have this new revelation, and we know that this Masonism is evil. And so they attracted people that way. Were they wrong about Masonic practice? No, they weren't wrong about that. Are they a true religion? No. So, but this is something else that also existed at the time of Muhammad. Muhammad did tell people who accidentally drank his urine that they won't ever have a stomach ache. He did suck on kids' tongues, saying that, I'm doing this because they'll be in Jannah forever. He did kiss Fatima and thrust his tongue into her mouth, and then justified it with his belief that he was special. So these two things can simultaneously be true and contradictory in their significance, because Muhammad was just a human being and he was not consistent, right? And from one of these, the traditions of the graves and everything else grew out. Especially since you're still talking to Muhammad today, even though he's dead, in your prayers, you would think that you should definitely be able to talk to him if you're standing in front of his grave. So, there are reasons for these things coming about. Were they developments? Yes. Were parts of those clearly things that Muhammad condemned? Yes. Was the entire unification of Ruhubiyah, was that entirely new? Yes. So all of these things are true.
So Yasir Qadhi, in this next segment, is going to explain the grave worship thing a little bit more, because the term grave worship might be deceptive and whatnot. He wants to make it clear. But keep in mind, this is actually a very important part of Shia Islam, is going to the graves of the imams and getting magical powers from them.
Ibn Qudama, the icon of Hanbali Islam pre-Ibn Taymiyyah, mentions that the one going for Hajj should then go visit the grave of the Prophet ﷺ in Medina out of respect to him, or however the phrasing goes, but to go visit the grave of the Prophet ﷺ. This is Ibn Qudama saying this. Ibn Taymiyyah comes along a century and a half later and basically says to visit the grave of the Prophet ﷺ with the intention of visiting the grave is a bid'ah and a stepping stone to shirk.
So he's saying that, but even within the Hanbali school, right, which Ibn Taymiyyah arises out of, that it was widely accepted and encouraged to visit the grave of Muhammad. He says, if you go on Hajj, you better visit the grave of Muhammad, because I guess you get special benefits or powers from visiting his grave for some reason. Ibn Taymiyyah comes along and says, no, this kind of seems to be shirk, guys. Why are you doing this? And now Salafis are like, all these practices, they're shirk, and all the synchronistic Muslims around the world, which there's probably 1 billion of, they're all committing shirk all the time by doing all these things. And Yasir Qadhi's point is, no, this has always been a part of Islam.
Well, no, he did say that it was developing, and it was a development of
yeah.
But
I mean, like
Muhammad's
the idea
was always approved of. Just to be clear,
right?
If you were standing in front of Muhammad's grave, you can talk to him. So you have to deal with that as a Salafi.
Yeah, so to be clear, I didn't mean the grave thing specifically. I meant all these like ritualistic practices and mystical beliefs and whatnot, right? They're developing based on the cultures Islam is connecting, but it's not a new thing, right? It's not a modern thing or a thing of the Middle Ages or something. Yeah. It's from the beginning. As Islam's encountering new cultures, they're taking the practices.
They're not really taking practices from the new cultures. These are things that are kind of embedded very heavily in Arab thought, Arab beliefs, and are things that people just kind of naturally gravitate toward. You'll see it spontaneously develop across the world in many different cultures because people want to do these things. So,
well, I was thinking more of like the, synchronistic Muslims in, for example, Southeast Asia, but same idea, right? Same idea, that there's a desire to connect with mystical ideas because it goes back to Muhammad. Even maybe the exact practices don't, but the idea that there's magic spells and
right,
a
Muhammad
mystical
taught
world
magical spells.
All
Muhammad
this goes
taught
back to
that there
Muhammad.
were spells. There's evil eye. There's spells that can affect you, and you need to take refuge from Allah in them. And here are some white magic things that you can recite that will provide you protection. And he obsessively recited them. So of course you can have tons of magic in Islam. Why wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm. So I just want to make it clear that Yasir Qadhi is saying that Ibn Taymiyyah is largely responsible for discouraging that. This next clip is on how Islam keeps reinventing itself.
The claim that modern Salafis have reconstructed his image, I actually agree with this, but I disagree with the person.
His image being Ibn Taymiyyah, that was the question.
And the methodology and the idea of saying this. I would say every single classical scholar who is put on a pedestal by modern movements, they're doing the exact same thing to their icon. I would say traditionalist Islam is reinventing Ghazali. I would say this. The same way modern Salafis are reinventing Ibn Taymiyyah. That's a product of fundamentalist movements where they go back and they romanticize certain figures and icons. So the Salafis are no more or no less guilty than any other movement in this regard. So I would say, yes, they're doing this, but who hasn't?
So what he's technically saying is that all the movements, they look to their teachers, they look to important figures in history, and they're romanticizing them, they're making them larger than life. But what he doesn't draw the connection to, which he should, is what about Muhammad, right?
Yeah.
Aren't people doing the same with Muhammad, romanticizing him, making him larger than life, making up nonsense about him, recreating them in their own desires, their own image? That's what he fails to at least express and probably actually realize. But he is correct, of course, that this is not just an Islamic thing, this is a human thing to romanticize the past.
And let's go. And here's something that he is not being honest with, bluntly. If you're talking about Ibn Taymiyyah and you misrepresent him, you have the writings of Ibn Taymiyyah where you can go back and say, hey, look, this is what Ibn Taymiyyah actually said. You can correct someone who is doing wrong things and saying lies about him. Ghazali, you can go back and correct them. And to be fair to the Salafi, they do that. They go, no, this is what the standard Salafi position is today. This is what Ibn Taymiyyah himself said. And we need to evaluate whether or not he's right and not just claim that this is what the Salafi have always believed if Ibn Taymiyyah himself believed otherwise. There are Salafi who do this. Ghazali and all the rest and the more mainstream, people do that. People go back to them and check on whether or not that's what they said. Now, it is a knee-jerk reaction to just say, I'm just believing what everyone's always believed, including this seminal figure who is Ibn Taymiyyah. That we've always been consistent, but because you have writings of Ibn Taymiyyah especially is easy to check. Like people have a harder time going back to the more obscure earlier figures, but this does happen. You'll see people fighting online, Muslims fighting online about why are you saying this and claiming that you're coming from Ibn Taymiyyah. If Ibn Taymiyyah said that.
And that's actually the exact context of the question. Basically, they're talking about his book and they're like, there's this debate. And he's like, well, there shouldn't be. You can just go read the writings, right? And to be perfectly honest, people who saying he said these things, they are just fooling themselves. He didn't say these things, basically.
Right. And that's what you should, if you say that you're believing what he believes because he believes it, then he ought to have actually said it. If you're saying that he did not say this, however, this is what the earliest generations after Muhammad, that's what Salafi means, those the followers, immediate generations after Muhammad, that this is what they actually believe, then pull up evidence of that. Now, none of you are going to actually believe what they believe, because what they believe, again, they believe in an anthropomorphic God, because that's what Muhammad taught. I just want to beat the drum 1,000 times that it is very clear what Muhammad taught. Anyone who's not going into the sources with blinders on would understand that Allah's a dude who doesn't poop or sleep or eat.
Mm-hmm. All right, so our next clip here is very telling. Again, this is going to nominally be about Ibn Taymiyyah, but listen to the words he's saying.
You cannot authentically follow somebody in the 10th century when you're living in the 20th century. You can't do that. You must selectively pick and choose and reinterpret. Every movement does this. So the modern Salafis are no less, no more guilty than any other strand in this regard.
I don't know why I said 10th century specifically. That's not Ibn Taymiyyah. Maybe he's referring to Hanbal. I'm not sure why he said 10th century. But what he's saying is, you know, people who say they're authentically following Hanbal or Ibn Taymiyyah or whoever, they can't really do that. You can't. What is Islam supposed to be? Authentically following the example of Muhammad from the 7th century?
And you can. You just don't want to. They can. It's completely available to you to believe that Allah is a dude up in the sky stomping around. Your theology can match Muhammad's. You just don't want it to. You can do that. There's nothing stopping you. Now, let me turn this on Christianity. Can I have the same beliefs about God that you find as the overwhelming beliefs in the early church fathers? Yeah, I do. Like, bluntly, I do. Now, in some cases, I can take positions where, well, you know, this is true of a certain practice, but I will also see the reasons that someone might do this other practice. And let me go ahead and be explicit. Baptism. Do we baptize infants? Did the early church baptize infants? No, they did not. You go into the Didache, there is no place in there, no concept of baptizing an infant. Why wouldn't you baptize an infant? Because baptism was an outgrowth of the dedication to God through ritual washings of the Jews. And when people came into Judaism, they did not wash kids under 3 years. They were considered born Jews, and of course you only had to bring in the first person in a generation. Christianity, everyone had to be baptized, but you baptized those who were of faith. So why baptize infants? Why did that start? Well, what happened whenever you didn't baptize infants? People started worrying, maybe my infant will go to hell if they aren't baptized. Maybe that relates to their salvation. So you'll have like the Council of Elvira that condemns anyone who says that unbaptized infants or children go to hell. And you start saying, like in gravestones, grave markers show that children were generally baptized who died young, right? Because if you have a tombstone of a kid, the kid died young, that they were usually baptized shortly before they died. That shows that they weren't baptized as infants. But then you got this weird belief that cropped up that your sins got magically erased when you got baptized and you're only responsible for the ones after that. So people started delaying baptism. So a rule went out that you had to baptize infants, were forced to, that you must, so that you can't have people running around sinning and going, oh, I'll be a Christian later, I'll get baptized later, I have my get out of hell free card. As long as I get dipped when I'm later on, I'll be fine. That this was a reaction to things that happen. So can I respect infant baptism, even though I absolutely do not believe that was a first century practice? I can, in the fact that it represents the entry into a participatory state of being in the church. You know, those children who were unbaptized, they partook in the bread of the Lord's table. Whenever it talks about your children are considered holy, that's how they're considered holy. They're able to partake in the Lord's Supper. And whenever you have systems that say that people who are not baptized can't partake in the Lord's Supper, that excludes children, that's a problem to me. That's a massive problem to me. So it has a service. It has a purpose. I can do that. I don't have to say that you must do this exact thing in all cases at all times.
Mm-hmm.
But can I believe what first century Christians believed? Yes. Can I articulate it in the way fourth century Christians articulated it, having articulated the same belief, which we know is the same because of the rejection of beliefs articulated in other ways? Yeah, I can do that too.
Mm-hmm.
And be entirely consistent. I don't have to do anything super weird if I do this. I don't have to be a weirdo. I don't have to do something crazy. Muslims are stuck where they have to be weirdos if they're going to believe what the early people actually believed, because they believe that Allah was a big human.
Mm-hmm. Well, and in many cases, not only that, I mean, you're definitely going to have to believe that, but you're going to have to sometimes believe contradictory ideas, since Muhammad changed his mind. And Yasir Qadhi, I think, kind of comes to the position that, different strands of Islam are contradictory, but it's all good. And I think this is probably his belief on the Quran as well, that different versions of the Quran contain contradictory ideas, and they can't really be explained by anything other than that there's different versions. But he says it's okay because it comes from Muhammad or it comes from Allah. So contradiction's all right. We don't mind. Our God is a God of contradiction. I think that's probably actually his theological position. He's never going to state that in the talk. No, surprisingly, but that does actually seem to be his position, because he keeps arguing that, all Islam is valid. He says that, we disagree about what he calls like minor things, but they're like deep theological issues, right? But it doesn't matter, because that's not what's important. What's important is that there's problems in the world. Our children are asking, does God exist or not? They're not asking, what is the nature of God? We'll get into all that at appropriate time. But previewing what's coming up there. So the next section, we're going to get into Mr. Wahhab, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, full name, who is a 18th century figure. He starts the ideas of Ibn Taymiyyah are, spreading. Some Muslims are following them, but he really brings them to the forefront eventually. At the time, the dominant idea is that of the Ottoman Empire, which is very liberal, I guess you could say, that very accepting of people who are not Muslims, and so on and so forth. And Mr. Wahhab brings the ideas of Ibn Taymiyyah to the forefront and starts the modern Salafi movement, really. And so he's going to spend a lot of time discussing his ideas. The first one is on the man himself.
You present two contrasting summaries of the life of Ibn Abdul Wahhab in your book. One is sympathetic and is sort of titled The Reviver of the Prophetic Message, and the other is more adversarial and is titled The Fanatical Deviant. Why did you believe it was important to juxtapose these two narratives?
I am so happy that you asked me this question. This is not scripted, by the way. I didn't ask you to ask this question. I'm so happy you asked it, because this is I haven't said this, but this is the first time it will be said here. When I was writing this book, I was really in a dilemma about how to write about Ibn Abdul Wahhab. Because how do you describe somebody who is viewed to be a mujaddid and a reformer by large groups of the people, who at the same time is also viewed to be a Khariji fanatical deviant by others?
So he's got a dilemma, right? Yeah, different people, whether they're Salafi or not, will view Wahhab, or, Wahhabis is another term, which would technically be a subset of Salafi, but I mean, in practice, they're kind of one and the same. They're kind of used as synonyms. People who are part of that movement will have a very high opinion of him. They'll think that he's restoring true Islam, but people who aren't will say, He's destroying Islam. He's undermining Islam as practiced by the Ottoman Empire and whatnot. So he's got this dilemma, right? People have very contrasting point of views, and his great solution is, I'll just write both. I'll just write a nice one and a not nice one. and this is kind of how he views Islam in general, right? You can just believe whatever you want to believe, and it's all good.
Right. And like, I mean, hey, let's pick on Luther. Luther was seen by some as the devil incarnate kind of thing, and by others as a crucial figure in reforming the church from massive deviations that had and abuses that had occurred. Now, even within the Catholic Church, there are Catholics scholars who have credited Luther with influentially saving the Catholic Church from a very dark and wrong path because of the rampant abuses that the Catholic Church was forced to address in response to Luther. Luther, who never wanted to be a schismatic, who only wanted to remove bad practices and accretions and things of that sort, who never thought of himself as doing anything new, but only cutting away things that were wrong that had come in. Can you treat him in an objective manner? Is that possible? Yeah, you can treat people who are controversial in an objective manner and find truth there. But if you have Yasir Qadhi's position on faith, can you do that? No, because to Yasir Qadhi, faith is not based in truth. It's not based in objectivity. It's not based in history. It's not based in reality. It's based on feelings and convictions that exist in spite of truth, which he has dogmatically now committed himself to affirming. So if Yasir Qadhi were going to write a book on Luther, he would be forced to justify every spectrum of position that exists about Luther within all of Catholicism, Protestantism, and Orthodoxy, which is insanity, because that's not how, because he would just go, well, you can believe whatever, and whatever you believe is your truth. I mean, that's really what he's going at. For him, truth is my truth, as long as you're a Muslim. Every Muslim truth is a truth, and they're all truths. But you should have truth the way I have truth, but at the same time, they're all truth. You can't have both. You can't argue information or facts and simultaneously affirm anything anyone believes. It's just untenable, and he is in this untenable position, and that's why his positions are so goofy.
Indeed. Let me take this 50 gifted memberships from Jack Ray.
Brothers and sisters, why to lose this great opportunity? Remember, when the person is on his deathbed, the last minute, he will ask Allah Jalla wa Ala to be delayed for 1 second to do what? Not to pray, not to do other things, but to give sadaqah, because sadaqah you can give it just like this, in 1 second.
No delay there from Jack Ray, sending in 50 reasoned answers memberships. Very, very generous of you, Jack. Appreciate your support as always. And I'm sure the 50 people who got a membership also are very appreciative, or at least many of them are. Some of them might just be random people who subscribe to the channel and no longer watch it. But I think it does seem to prioritize those who watch. So for the most part, it'll be people who are engaged. And we'll probably have a members only live stream soon. So much going on between Holes 2.0 and the hotel hijab scandal. haven't had time to do something like that, but we'll definitely get a member stream soon. And Alexander says, finally managed to catch one of the streams alive. I guess it has been a little while since we saw you, Alexander, but glad you're here today. So the next several clips, he's going to kind of explain the development of Wahhabism. This first one is on the earliest followers.
We don't want the modern subscribers of the movement to actually follow the founder of the movement. And we thank God, I say genuinely, as a practicing believing Muslim, alhamdulillah, the modern movement, by and large, has distanced itself from the original teachings to the point of quite literally defending a distorted version and claiming that those who are preaching the real version or those who are describing the real version are deviant and wrong. I would much rather the modern followers of Abdul Wahhab consider me to be a mubtadi' than to follow the teachings of Ibn Abdul Wahhab originally. I say this bluntly.
So my mistake there, I forgot that this clip was in before he describes the earliest segment, but he's saying, so the question posed by the hosts was, there's this debate within, scholarship or within modern Muslim discussion about who's right about the ideas of Wahhab. And he's like, there's no debate, right? This is a modern development. People are reinterpreting what he said, but I'm very glad they are, because what he actually said is horrific, and I don't want anyone to follow that.
And do you know why he doesn't like it? Because you were setting the Sufis on fire. Ibn Taymiyyah was big about saying Sufis on fire.
Oh, that's exactly why he doesn't like it. Because I think it's in the next clip, but he explains that they're takfiring people. They're saying that all these people aren't Muslims. Only their tiny sect of, at the time, like probably literally thousands of people are the true Muslims. Everyone else is not. And I don't like that. I don't like it when you say they're not true Muslims. And I don't like it when you attack other Muslims and raise arms against them. That's why I don't want anyone to follow this.
Right. So I want to approve of anything.
Hold on, Mary, just one second. Second. Think also what this means about Muhammad, right? Right? Don't follow him. He's evil. He's horrible. Go ahead.
Yes, literally setting them on fire. Just to be clear, he was big on burning Sufis. Well, if you look at the example of Muhammad, as long as you externally followed certain rules, then you could be counted as a Muslim. You were a submitter because you were following the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And among those submitters, some are believers and some are not. So every believer is a Muslim. Only some Muslims are believers. Muhammad was fine with hypocrites and people who didn't really believe the nonsense he was saying, but were hanging around because of the money he was giving them. He was fine with that, provided they submitted to him. So when you talk about killing people over what they believe about Allah, yeah, that's an innovation. Because Muhammad didn't care what you believed. He just cared that you submitted to the rules that he set out. Some of the issues, though, are that some of the rules that are set out are in conflict with practices that became commonplace later. So, like, saying, I am the truth, taking Allah's name and saying that you are instantiating it in the world, like, seems to be against the real idea of what Muhammad was teaching that people were supposed to do. So where's the line between going, oh, anybody who obeys the caliph is a Muslim, and what is obedience to the caliph? What does the caliph need to require of people? There's going to be a tension there. There is. But the reason why this was so generous is so that they could be more empowered to slaughter everyone else. Let's be clear. This wasn't generous out of any other thing than we have more bodies with more swords to kill more other people. So this generosity and inclusivity existed because it empowered them to exterminate others and subjugate others better.
Absolutely. So Yasir Qadhi is now going to describe the phases of the Salafi movement, or the Wahhabist movement, technically, starting with the first wave.
Up until the movement, up until 1930 or 40, no writer who described the movement described it except as it being a takfiri jihadist movement. Not a single person.
So this is what's going to distinguish the strands, right? Obviously, they have other ideas, but the distinguishment is their treatment of other Muslims. So that they're takfiring, they're saying that you're not a real Muslim, you're outside of Islam, you're basically a pagan. He describes how they said everyone was a pagan. He's like, it was just taken for granted that the Ottoman Empire was pagan, but even all the tribes that would align to him or remain neutral, right? Remain neutral in their desire to wage war against the Ottoman Empire would all be takfired. They'd all be said to be not valid, not real Muslims. And then the other strand is jihadist. And this is going to be a pattern, right, in Islam, that it rises, they become a new strand rises, right? They're very enthusiastic. They want to wage war on everyone. They want to kill everyone. They want to bring Allah's will. That's the first phase.
And so, but part of the problem is that immediately after Muhammad dies, you have these wars between supposed Muslims, like the Apostasy War. These folks don't want to follow the caliphs. Muhammad's dead. We want to go off and do our own thing. And then you had the Qadari controversy about fate, and the people who denied fate were cast out of Islam and were slaughtered. During the Mu'tazilite ascendancy, everyone who wasn't a Mu'tazilite faced death in certain regions. Like, this is a part of very early Islam too. So
he's not saying it's not. He's just describing the movement. And what I'm saying is that this is a pattern throughout Islamic history. That you have three phases. The first phase is enthusiastic war on all the non-believers. And in our own time, you can think of ISIS, and actually Qadhi will mention ISIS later, and he'll say exactly that. That they rising in response to people turning away from, becoming more liberal, becoming less enthusiastic, more secular. These movements arise out of that. So Wahhabism arises out of a, kind of laissez-faire, do what you want to do attitude, reignites, at least the Salafis would say, reignites the early spirit of Islam. And then we'll get to phase 2 and phase 3, but it's a repeating pattern in Islam that you have these jihadist movements, and then you have phase 2, which we'll get to here in a second, and then you have phase 3, and then it kind of cycles back around.
Yep, and that is true. And it's true of very, very early Islam, and part of that is because of the way that Muhammad himself behaved, gave rise to this being an inevitable thing in Islam. Like, you can't, because of his teachings, you're going to run into this.
Yeah, because Muhammad himself exhibited these different strands. We'll see. All right, so going on to wave 2, and this isn't Qadhi's term. This is actually an academic term. There's actually academic division of the Wahhabist movement into 3 waves. So the first wave, jihadist, takfiri. Second wave,
he begins to soften, because now that you have a kingdom, now that you have a country.
So the obviously not Wahhab, he's dead, but eventually the movement's gaining enough force, and they become they're able to take control of what now is Saudi Arabia.
He begins to soften, because now that you have a kingdom, now that you have a country in the modern world, you cannot claim we have to do jihad against everybody else. So this individual, this personality, the teacher of Sheikh bin Baz, he basically says the same as wave 1, but acts differently than wave 1. This is wave 2. Nothing changes in theory, but in action, everything changes.
So phase 2 is you affirm all the same doctrines. You affirm the doctrines of jihad and takfir and say these people aren't Muslims, but in practice you don't live it out. You don't actually kill people. You have diplomatic relations to people who you're saying aren't Muslims, and you treat them like Muslims, stuff like that. Because practically speaking, you now have a kingdom, and if you're just trying to fight everyone all the time, you'd just be giving unrest. In other words, Islam doesn't work, right? So it develops into phase 2. What you have in phase 1, violent jihad. Phase 2, like, okay, we actually have some power now. How do we maintain that? Well, we can't just keep waging war. We'll just destroy ourselves. So what do? We pretend like these are important things, but we act differently.
Yep.
Nothing to add to that one?
That's a good summary of it. I mean, that's, and again, these tensions arise because of the historical pattern of Muhammad himself. You see these things in Muhammad. So how does it express in the real world after Muhammad's gone? Through these phases that the society will always go through. What he thinks he can do, he can come and be the rescuer of Islam, and I can get you away from this. But here's the thing. Once all external threats are gone, you're just going to have another jihadi group go, wait a second, here are all these people doing those things that they shouldn't be doing and that they should be outside of Islam for doing. So now we need, again, you can't have peace in Islam. It can never exist because this is inherent to Islam itself. Both the complete disregard of the law in actual practice and the extremely strict law being expressed. Just like, again, I always talk about how when Westerners visited Islamic lands, the first thing that they noted was how sexually depraved everyone was. That everyone was going around thinking about sex, thinking about their romantic attachments and their conspiracies and their lovers and all of these other things. And this was always the reality. On the flip side, you have this talk of purity and wonderfulness and self-control and everything else. What do you do about these two things? Islam leads to both simultaneously. So what happens? At some point, someone reacts to this tension by starting a purification movement. If you put a wall around a space, they were able to feed themselves. They were able to have a wonderful life as Muslims. And this country that you've walled off, they would be slaughtering each other because they must, because that is what Islam will always lead to, never to peace.
So we now come to wave 3, which is what Yasir Qadhi was formerly a member of. And as Mary says, he thinks that they can escape this cycle and embrace post-salafism, as he calls it. If you know what postmodernism is, think postmodernism. That's why he's saying, like, it's just related to your culture. There is no absolute truth. Everyone just kind of forms their own truth. That is his idea of how to escape this cycle. But phase 3 of the cycle here.
Third wave is to intellectually solve the problem of the second wave and even the first wave. How do you reconcile the claim that the bulk of the Muslim world is guilty of shirk, but they're not mushrik? How do you reconcile? You bring about, you extrapolate from a well-known Sunni principle. This principle is not new. Wahhabis didn't discover it. And that is al-udhru bil-jahl. Ignorance is an excuse. Now, this principle was rarely invoked pre-Wahhabi.
So he says the third phase is, so you're now living in contradiction, right? You're saying one thing while practicing something different. You're saying we need to violently oppose anyone who's not a true Muslim, but you're not actually doing that. So how do you go to phase 3? You create a way to get around it intellectually, and you say, oh, all those other Muslims, they're just living in ignorance. It's okay. Because they're doing the best they can with the knowledge they have available. So that's phase 3 and Yasir Qadhi's little framework here, which is not unique to him. This is actually an academic framework, maybe like what he's saying about it, but the 3 phases is an academic framework. So the 3rd phase is you resolve the conflict by saying it's okay. We can just all get along. We can just have different ideas. In other words, you get a very open, secular environment, which then, of course, is going to lead to a reformist movement. I think you probably already discussed anything, but anything you want to add there?
Nope. I just repeat myself.
Yep. So the next one is where he's going to talk about ISIS and others and how they're responding to this 3rd wave.
The modern jihadist movements, in particular ISIS, have tapped into first wave Wahhabism quite authentically.
Very short there, but I just want to get his words on it. They've gone to the first wave and they said, oh, we're now living in a era similar to what they were encountering in the Ottoman Empire, where the Muslim world, at least the rich Gulf countries, are moderating themselves, are making movements towards being very open, and they're saying this is not Islam. It's time to violently oppose these people. So there you go. We'll go ahead and go on to the next one, which is on hypocrisy.
For me, a number of factors forced me to take a stand. Either I could pretend to preach a version that I did not believe in, which to me would be the height of hypocrisy, and I'd have to answer to Allah. Because if I'm preaching sincerely, at least I'm excused in that regard, that I can say, oh Allah, I thought this was true. But if I'm preaching knowing it's wrong, to me that is a very, very dangerous thing. And I can honestly state, and I hope I remain this way to that till I die, everything I preach of Islam, I believe it to be true. Otherwise, I would not preach it.
So he's now talking about why he personally left the Salafi movement. He could go on preaching it, but he doesn't actually believe it. I'm going to call cap here, though, because he's simultaneously teaching that the Quran is perfectly preserved right down to the letter, and to Muslim audiences in the mosque and whatnot, while teaching to his students, advanced students of knowledge, that no, it's there's tons of variants and we have no idea what to do with that. So he says that would be the height of hypocrisy to teach something that you don't believe in, but unfortunately this is something he himself has engaged in and continues to engage in to these days. Hence the question he asked at the start: what kind of answer do you want? Right? Do you want the faith answer, or do you want the academic answer? Okay, you want the academic answer? In that case, I'll be true, I'll be fair, I'll be honest. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and again, he's thinking that there's a resolution. There is none. There's just none.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is just what Islam is. You can't go, we're just going to not actually believe that anything is true by saying that whatever you feel is true. That's not resolution.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Right. Again, he calls it post-salafism, which is mostly his term. There is like some academic use of it, but think postmodern, right? That there is no actual truth. The next one he's going to talk about who's outside of Islam, I believe.
First wave Wahhabism would have to dissociate itself from third wave Wahhabism in matters of creed and theology, to the point of first wave considering third wave to be outside the fold of Islam. And I will defend that statement academically. The founder would have considered his own biological descendants, who are now the ministers and the grand and whatnot. The founder, if he were fair to his own principles, would have had to consider his own heirs, biological and intellectual, to literally be outside the fold of Islam.
So he's saying that the literal leaders of Saudi Arabia today, who popularized primarily during the third wave phase, but popularized the Salafi movement or the Wahhabist movement, would be considered non-Muslims by Wahhab himself because of the cycle, right? The things have changed so much. They're pretending that they're going back to him, but the things have changed so much over 300 years. Islam has evolved to such a degree that they're teaching something completely different. And I don't think that he's wrong, right? I think that the ideas are constantly evolving, constantly changing. This idea that there's, pure Islam and there's just like occasional deviance or something is just like complete nonsense. Islam has been a religion of constant innovation, even though that's supposed to be the one thing it can never do, which is why, to his credit, Muhammad, the so-called prophet, was correct when he said that the first 3 generations of Muslims are the only ones that will accurately follow it. Your thoughts, Mary?
I think that he's being a little bit goofy in saying that they are
completely
outside of Islam, because the only thing that they're not doing is killing everyone who disagrees. I don't think that was.
Well, no, I think that in the Middle East, not in. So he's actually going to clarify this later. He says that the movements in Great Britain and the United States and the ones that are like making all the noise don't fit into this category, but the actual leadership of Saudi Arabia has moved away from the movement entirely and are just only giving it lip service at this point. And I think that's probably actually true. Saudi Arabia seems to want to be a secular kingdom not from the Islamic leadership, but from the actual political leadership side of it, things. All right, so let's go on to how Islam is always adapting or innovating, put differently.
All movements traverse through this trajectory of their socio-political context, and in order to survive, they have to adapt. Salafism is not unique in this regard. Every movement, Deobandism started off as an anti-colonialist jihadist project against the British. Now they're the most tame, pacifist Tablighi Jamaats you can imagine, right? All movements evolve. Traditionalism, I can critique them as well. Look at how they evolved. Look at where they became now. Every movement, you have to. Ibadis came from one place, and look where they are now. And I can say a lot about the Ibadis. I think they're greatly misrepresented by their critics, right? There's a lot of positives to say about them, right? My point is that every movement has to evolve. There's no such thing as this unblemished diamond that the Salafis imagine that is being handed from generation to generation.
So he says that he doesn't say every movement of Islam, but that's what he means. Every movement of Islam has to evolve. Why does it have to evolve? That he doesn't tell us, but I'll tell you why. Because Islam as taught by Muhammad doesn't work. It's not stable. It's not a long-term solution. It can only work for short periods of time because it's completely impractical to constantly be trying to kill everyone who is not a Muslim. Or even not be a pure Muslim, right? Be a so-called hypocrite, but call themselves Muslim. So that's Yasir Qadhi kind of saying the same thing that I've been saying throughout. Anything you want to add to that?
No, it's just his copiation.
Yeah, okay.
It just really is. And
all right. So now the host asked him about what in academia is being called fourth wave, that people feel that in present times, like I was saying, the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia in particular, have moved away from the Salafi movement or started a new phase, a new wave, which they're tentatively calling the fourth wave, but it's evolving at this time. So they ask him about that and what he thinks about that. And now Qadhi's going to give his understanding of fourth wave Wahhabism.
I believe in some ways, yes, it will. It will make it unrecognizable. But just like first wave lives on in small pockets, so too third wave will live on in larger pockets. We see this in America and England to this day.
So there you go on America and England continuing to follow the movement while Saudi. So the question was, will this fourth wave make the movement completely unrecognizable? And the answer is, yeah, I think in many ways it will. But this is nothing new. Third wave made it unrecognizable to second wave, second unrecognizable to first wave. Obviously, there's some exaggeration there. But the point being that they have different understandings of what Islam is in every generation. Every generation is changing Islam in Yasir Qadhi's view. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, Islam does change. It pretends that it doesn't. But it tends to go along a cycle of a wheel, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And the extremes were in the earliest Islam. The Mutazilites were one extreme. The other extreme were the anthropomorphists. Okay, you're going to have people bouncing between those two constantly. Those who want to believe in something that makes some kind of sense, and those who don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's definitely a cycle. I mean, the so-called fourth wave here is basically adopting the position of the Ottoman Empire towards its end, but that's not how the Ottoman Empire started, right? It started at a violent jihadist movement to take over the Christian lands, and then they gained some power, and then they started to compromise, and then eventually it became theological that this is the only way, and then people are like, wait a minute, this doesn't seem to be what Muhammad did. Let's let's start a reform movement. And so I think it is a constant cycle. And it's because the reason it's a cycle is because Muhammad taught something that is not sustainable. So people periodically will look to what Muhammad said, and he's saying that, like, that even exists today. Strands of first wave exist somewhere in the world. He earlier kind of said it was ISIS, right? And the Taliban. He also said the Taliban specifically. I don't think it was in the part I clipped, but he specifically said Taliban, ISIS, groups like these are carrying the spirit of the first wave. And it's just going to continue to happen, right? If ISIS, obviously ISIS is basically extinct. The movement probably, they'll probably never gain massive political power.
I would disagree. There's a new ISIS, like what there is currently in Syria.
Well,
ISIS.
Sorry, I didn't mean that I didn't mean there are no ISIS people or there are no terrorists. I meant that, like, as far as being a significant force to be considered.
Well, no, the leader currently, the current leader of Syria is ISIS and is doing ISIS things. Syria is in the hands of ISIS. They just put another label on themselves. So.
I mean, whatever. I'll avoid the political discussion there. The point being that if ISIS ever gained political power, you'd find them moderating themselves over time.
Yeah,
because that's the only way to sustain political power.
The Druze, which is what they're doing now. They're going to kill all the Christians. They're going to kill all the Druze. They're going to kill all the Shia, and then eventually they're going to be a little bit more moderate after they finish slaughtering everyone they claim.
Right. I mean, Saudi Arabia can be moderate because it's 100% Muslim, right? But then eventually, right, they'll grow to the point where they become fat, so to speak, that they're just enjoying their wealth and living a very decadent life. And then there'll be a reformist movement, and there'll be a new jihadi movement arising. So I absolutely think it's a cycle. Yasir Qadhi thinks we can escape this with post-salafism, which we're almost to. But first, he wants to talk about what the appeal of the Salafi movement is, or was, I should say.
The movement appeals to people intellectually. There's a mass appeal for reasons that everybody should acknowledge, and the book mentions explicitly. It's simplistic slogans. It's call to worship Allah alone. It's giving primacy to the persona of the Prophet ﷺ. These are slogans that frankly, no Muslim would disagree with. Of course, the devil's in the details of how you interpret them, but the concept, no Muslim would disagree with. So Salafism appeals intellectually. Now, where does money come into play? Money comes into play as it comes into play with anything, and that is supporting the infrastructures that are making these claims. Giving media attention, publishing books, producing graduates of Islamic universities. So while it is true, nobody handed me a wad of cash, it is also true that I had a scholarship to go study at the most prestigious university for free.
So the question was kind of like, what role does petrodollars play in the rise of the third wave Salafism? So he says it has intellectual appeal, which is a very strange thing to say, because what he ends up describing is anti-intellectual, right? They focus on simple slogans. They focus on not thinking about anything, just saying, oh, it's very simple, just worship Allah. Right, that's what you see from the Dawa guys, right? You see them saying it's very simple. Islam is not complicated at all. You don't have to worry about anything. And he says this has intellectual appeal. Well, I wouldn't call it intellectual, but it does have appeal, right? The idea that something's very simple and you don't have to think about it. You just blindly follow it. And then he says, but also the dollars, while they weren't bribing people to come in, they were important, right? Because they're setting up all this infrastructure, having this cultural influence. And he says it's actually similar to the way the United States has cultural influence around the world. Our media and our entertainment, they spread around the world. It influences the way that people think, but they're not like actively putting X dollars towards converting X person. Your thoughts on the appeal of Salafism, Mary?
The reason that's appealing is because people look around and go, hey, Muhammad said all these things, but here's what the Islamic world actually looks like. So maybe we should do these things that sound like what Muhammad says. Like that's it. That's the appeal. This sounds more like what Muhammad said than anything else that I see.
All right. He has a second one on the appeal of Salafism. I think this one's more personal, if I remember correctly.
Salafism really gave life to a new generation of second generation born and raised Muslims who didn't find the cultural Islam of their parents to be relevant. Salafism was a spark, an exciting spark. I remember as a teenager, it was authentic, looked to be. It gave this academic veneer that wasn't found in the dull, boring, cultural, tame version of Islam of my parents.
So he actually basically just said what you said there, Mary, in different words, that to him personally and to many other people is appealing because they're kind of living in a secular, boring Islam. And they look and they say, oh, this is exciting. It looks like it's what Muhammad did. So we should follow that.
And that is true to some extent, because if you're outside of a place that has an Islamic culture, and you're just reading words about things that Muhammad talked about, and you're not paying attention to what he was really doing, you will come up with a very Salafi, ISIS type of view. If you look at what he's doing, all the things that he permits, all the things that he blinks at, all the things that he allows, you come up with one of those, everybody's around, running around, banging other people, committing all of these sins, committing all of these evil things, but we have this veneer. Do you pay attention to his words or his actions? That's the question. And a lot of people are paying attention to his words, not realizing that they don't match his actions.
And as Goodbye Park here says, veneer is the key word here, or facade might be a better word for it. Obviously, there's nothing really academic behind it, as this talk by Yasir Qadhi illustrates, right? If they said they wanted the faith answer, he probably would have been saying something very different. But here he's saying that, it gives this pseudo-intellectual appearance where it looks like, we have all this great ways of determining what Muhammad actually did, and we're going to just follow exactly what Muhammad did. And this is true Islam, but it's all just a facade in Yasir Qadhi's opinion. And I can't say I disagree too much about that. Now, one more clip on, so Wahhabism is associated with what people who don't understand Islam call political Islam, right? This idea of, wanting to dominate the world, of offensive jihad. Yasir Qadhi is going to say, no, that's not the case, but maybe not in the way you might think.
One of the problems of previous categorizations is that they're approaching Salafism from their own lens. And especially after 9/11, that lens was completely political and jihadi. And to me, political and jihadi manifestations of Salafism are trends that you find in all movements, not just Salafism.
All movements of Islam. So what he's saying is it's unfair to say that Salafis are jihadists or political Islam, or they want to put the caliph back in place or whatever, because all strands of Islam in their fundamentalist stage, their reformist stage, are the same way. He doesn't explain why, but I think we know why, Barry. Why would all rising reformist movements of Islam be political in this way?
Because that's how Islam was born. That is what Islam is at its root. It's a political movement that seeks to establish itself by violence. So why wouldn't it have this problem? Well, I call it a problem. Why wouldn't it have this nature? Why wouldn't it have this approach?
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Put in we're putting the quiet part out loud since Yasir Qadhi is not saying it explicitly, but I'm sure that's what he's thinking, right? He's got to be smart enough to realize there's a reason that in the fundamentalist stage, all Islamic movements go this way. So now he's going to explain post-salafism, or his personal current view.
They seem to have found the movement lacking in addressing the issues of the time. It's not doing its job to benefit the ummah directly. It seems a bit antiquated, a bit fundamentalist, thinking backwards, out of touch with reality. In my case, I will say frankly, obsessing over arcane issues of theology that are of little to no relevance to the modern world. But see, that accusation also applies to Sufis and Ash'aris and Maturidis as well. It's not just Salafis.
So in his new Islam, and I think it's fair to call it a new Islam, see, we get beyond all those silly things about like theological debate, and we get past all those old-fashioned ideas, all those weird 7th century desert practices. And we ask, instead of asking what would Muhammad do, we ask, what is the most practical solution for us here today? This is the new Islam that Yasir Qadhi wants to promote. I don't think that might be, he might object to the way I put it, but I don't think that's an unfair characterization of what he's saying. You create your own truth. Islam can be whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, he just wants this ummah that embraces the whole world by having no foundation in any kind of reality. He's against objectivism and reality because he thinks that will save Islam, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, he wants to bring postmodernist, there is no truth, you create your own truth ideas to Islam. That's his solution to the cycle of jihad, hypocrisy, tolerance, reform, back to jihad. That's his solution to this, is to just create your own truth. Now he's going to explain more about his ideas in these coming segments here. He's going to say that we need to stop addressing ideas that have no theological importance.
Then honestly, anybody who does this publicly on Twitter, on YouTube, back and forth, honestly has lost the plot completely in my eyes, not just Salafis. And I realized 15 years ago, I don't want to do this. That's why I quit from the institute I used to be a part of. I stopped teaching abstract theology, even as I remain passionate about it, which is why I put it on YouTube for academic talks called, my library chats. That's for academic stuff. I don't preach from the mimbar, istawa ala al-arsh. I don't bash other Muslims because they celebrate or don't celebrate the Mawlid. These are utterly abstract theoretical issues of no relevance. Lots of people feel this way now.
So I laugh because he starts up by saying anyone who posts these theological debates on YouTube or Twitter is a fool destroying the ummah. And then he says, and by the way, I post them on YouTube. I stopped teaching them from the pulpit. But what he's changed is he used to try to teach his congregation theology. He used to try to teach them what he understood to be the correct theology, the correct understanding of religion, the correct understanding of who Allah is. And now, instead, he just teaches them practical matters, how to live their life, how to address the evil American government under which he lives, stuff like that. That's what he does from the pulpit. Now he doesn't worry about theological issues anymore, even though he personally is very interested into them. That's just not Islam to him anymore. That's only for the scholars. The common Muslims, they just need to know what to do. So that's what he tells them from the pulpit each week. Your thoughts, Mary?
I find that very funny. But that's the thing. He wants Islam to just be this list of practical matters and everyone just agrees.
Mm-hmm. And just so you know, Mary, you're being absolutely crazy in the chat to the Muslim, I'm sure, by holding him accountable for what he said.
Well, so she's just being a child. She can't grasp math, and people who are Muslim very often can't grasp math because Allah can't grasp math either. So she doesn't understand that if you do a survey of everyone who is Muslim background and 15% say they are not Muslim, if you did a survey only of second generation people who would make up the vast majority of that,
it's going to be higher.
You'd have about 30% who are not Muslim. That's about how these numbers would work. And she just has a hard time with math and grasping this. She thinks that means that 15% of people raised in Islam will leave it. That's not what it means. She just doesn't understand like how percentages work, and she's flipping out because of that and just really having a hard time.
Yeah, so if you're trying to dispute that 30% of Muslims in the West leave Islam, you're just mistaken. I don't know why you would try to defend a falsity. It shouldn't matter. If Islam's the truth, it doesn't matter how many people are leaving it. But the fact that you're very bothered by this and trying to destroy it suggests to me that you don't really have confidence in the theology of Islam. Just like
and the numbers in general have been between 20 to 30-ish%, and it's growing yearly, of the new younger generation who are leaving Islam. This is just the set pattern that if you come to the West and you have kids, a certain percentage of them will leave Islam, and this number grows greatly. Very few of those who come from a backwards place where they have been brainwashed and perhaps they're super inbred there too. We don't know. But very few of those who move to the West directly as adults will leave Islam. Their children leave. I think that this is just really hard for her to understand that when you have a mixed bag of adults, you have some of them from the old country and a smaller number of them now, because we have been sane in the past and not allowed larger numbers of Muslims because they believe filthy, foul things to come into their cities because they will attack people and behave like barbarians, like their prophet. But so the vast majority are these people who grew up in these other countries, and a minority, a fairly small minority of the total number, are people who were born and raised here. And of that minority, so many have left Islam that you still get numbers like a French study that says that people who have Muslim parents, all of them, including all the new immigrants, 15% currently say that they are not Muslim themselves. That's just, I can't understand it for you. I can tell you about it and explain it, but I can't do the thinking for you, hon.
Yeah, you've explained it well, and Alika or Alika, whatever, says that show me the numbers. You can go. It's not the topic of today. You can do a YouTube search. You can go to your favorite internet search engine and search for it. It's not hard to find. It's all over the place. They've done the surveys, both indirectly, as Mary's alluding to, but also directly, right? Directly, you can find the numbers. I've done it myself. I've gone through the data, and it is indeed in the 30+% range. Again,
it wasn't. It was more closer to, 20 years ago. It would be more like 20%, but every year
and it's on the
creeping
rise.
up.
It's on the rise.
Yep.
Apostasy is on the rise. Especially in the West, where people actually have the option of leaving, but even in Islamic countries, it is on the rise. It is growing rapidly in most of the Muslim world. And again, if you actually believed Islam was the truth, you wouldn't care about numbers. I don't care about the number of Christians in the world. I mean, I care about people. I hope that more people become Christians because more people will go to heaven and be united with God. But I don't care about the numbers. That's not how I determine truth. All right.
And so, by the way, the old thing about the number of converts way out to the number of apostates, that's not true anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And anywhere anymore. It was true a while ago. It's not true anymore. It is massively shifted in the other direction.
All right, let's move on. I don't want to distract too much from Yasir Qadhi here. So the next segment is how Salafis, but maybe reinterpret it, are trapped in the past.
All fundamentalist movements have adapted a safety blanket, a child safety blanket. When they see the monsters, the imaginary monsters outside, in this case real monsters, they just cover themselves with that imaginary blanket. That blanket which is going back to the past. I can't discuss modern Islamophobia. Khalas, let me discuss the sifat issue because I'm comfortable doing that.
So what he's saying, he actually said all fundamentalist movements. In other words, all, like attempts to get back to the original Islam, all these movements, they cover themselves with a blanket to shield themselves from the monsters, like a child would, except the monsters are real. There's real threats to Islam out there. And we don't know how to deal with those. We don't know how to deal with Islamophobia. So we just go and say, but we know how to debate how to properly do prayer. So let's do that. Let's debate how to properly do prayer. Very interesting statement. Your thoughts, Mary, about how all Islam is trapped in the past?
How can it not be? Who is the perfect example for all time?
Indeed. So the next one here, he uses a phrase you may have heard him say before in a different context.
99% of the ummah is burning. I'm sorry. Post-salafism understands this reality and calls a spade, calls out the nakedness of the emperor and says, guys, enough is enough. I really don't care about the Sifat controversy as a cultural issue.
So when he says 99% of the ummah is burning, there was some context to this, which was not convenient to clip ahead of time. But he's saying that 1% are really interested in these theological debates. The other 99% are more interested in practical problems. So we're wasting all our time speaking to 1% when we could be speaking to the 99%. The emperor has no clothes, which is what he said about the Quran as well. That our theology can't be defended. So let's just go and defend the practical matter here. We're ignoring that the world is destroying Islam by convincing our children that Islam is false. So what we need to do is we need to go and concentrate on telling them arguments for God's existence and then just assume everything else. That's basically what he wants to be done. Teach the kids how to defend the idea that God exists, and then from there you just magically get everything you believe about Islam. Because it doesn't matter what else you believe. This is Qadhi Islam, everyone. Now, he's going to make another really telling statement here about how he approaches theology.
Because the problems that Salafis bring and Ash'aris bring, they are only there because we bring them forth. Here's the irony of ironies. If Salafis and Ash'aris stopped talking about the Sifat, it would cease to be a problem amongst the Ummah. Think about it. The only people obsessed with the issue are the people who are obsessed with the issue.
So he gives one specific example there, but he means broadly, right?
Yeah.
Don't debate anything. If we don't debate these issues, the issues disappear. So we can have completely contradictory even as he called earlier, blasphemous views of God. But as long as we don't debate them, they don't
They're
exist.
fine. It doesn't matter. Who cares about what Allah actually says and who he is and what he teaches? Who cares about his prophet and what he told people to do? Just stop talking about it and then we're good.
Uh-huh. But again, postmodern idea here, right? That truth is determined by what you care about. You determine truth. We don't care about the nature of Allah. Well, he no longer has a nature that we need to worry about. we can just, as Mary would say, we can just say that Allah is a creature with 4 legs that barks and lives in Mary's house. And that's perfectly fine as long as we don't debate it. The problem isn't there.
Exactly. Problem isn't there as long as you don't point it out. But that's kind of what a lot of historical Islam did. Yes, women were running around banging absolutely any man that they wanted to. The problem doesn't exist as long as you don't talk about it, as long as it's not public. Pederasty is normative in Islam. Men have sex with boys. They rape boys forcibly. They target the fatherless. They exploit young people. That's fine. You don't publicly acknowledge it. So he does have a point that he has good standing in Islam to do this.
See, this is the miracle of Islam. It invented postmodernism before postmodernism. So now he's going to talk about the issues that the youth actually care about, and thus the issues that should be being discussed.
Our children are discussing whether the Prophet ﷺ is a role model or not because of ethical issues of the seerah. While we're discussing the attributes of God, our youth are discussing whether God exists or not. And if we don't understand this reality, the level of disconnect will continue to exacerbate and increase. And this is my pet peeve.
That's hilarious.
About Salafism, about all fundamentalist movements. Go log online. To this day, what do Salafis do? They bash Yasir Qadhi over and over and over again. Khalas, I'm a deviant. Understood. Now let's move on. Can you benefit the ummah?
So he's like, you can call me a deviant. I don't care. But he's okay. So he has like 1 grain of a point here that, youth growing up in America, right? That's his perspective because he's growing up in America. They have they're not being taught theology. They're not understanding anything about Islam, but you can apply this to Christianity too. In at least certain churches, not every church, right? Some churches are good, some are not. But you could say that the youth aren't learning things. They're asking questions about ethical issues. I wonder why the youth are raising questions about the ethical issues of Muhammad. Could be because of the internet and free spread of information or something.
Yeah,
like
because
that.
maybe people know, because now they can't be just shoved the sealed nectar and you never find out the disgusting things Muhammad did. Now people can go, wait a second, why did he put his penis in a 9-year-old? Oh, he's supposed to be the pattern of behavior for all time. If Muhammad puts his penis in a 9-year-old, it is a pattern for all time. You put your penis into a 9-year-old. That is the pattern for all time by your theology. You can't escape that. You can say, well, if they're going to shoot me dead for doing that in this country, then I shouldn't do that right now. If they will hang me from my neck until I die, well, I don't have to do it. But the pattern that was established by your prophet is that you do. So if you get power, what should you do? You should put your penis in a 9-year-old or allow other people who want to do so. That is the pattern of your prophet. And you have to grasp that. Now you can go, oh, well, that was the norm of the time.
He was just a product of his culture.
But here's the thing. It's cultural. No, your prophet is supposed to be the pattern for all time. He's not supposed to be, he just did whatever the culture said. Also, he introduced it. No one before him was putting their penises in small children except for the pederasts. So, except for doing it to prepubescent boys, no one's putting their penises in kids. Doing it to girls, Muhammad innovated that. There is strong evidence of a coming of age ceremony tied to the first menstruation of girls, which means that while girls were betrothed before their first period, they were not married until after it, because there's no significance in menstruation. If they were banging you before and after, and it makes no difference. The reason why you had that ceremony is because it made a difference. It made you actually, the contract of marriage could now be fulfilled after this point.
And just to be clear, Mary's talking about the pagan cultures
Yes, the
of
pagan culture.
Arabia.
Pagan Arabia. Pagan Arabia did not previously have sex with prepubescent girls and call it a marriage. Muhammad introduced that. He said that this is now what we do. Here's how to divorce your prepubescent wives. This is a pattern that I have set for my people. This is my people's laws. And if you go, oh, well, we don't have to. No. You need to say, yes, we bang small children because men want to have sex with kids, and this is letting them do it. Because that's what Muhammad said. It's here because you will want to do it, and I want to do it, so this is the rule. And you need to tackle that. And the idea that, oh, if we just back up on saying what Allah is, and we let Allah be a four-legged animal that barks, it'll all be fine. And people stop worrying about the fact that Muhammad introduced child sex. That's not going to get you anywhere. It's just going to show that you have no answers for anything.
Exactly, Mary. So like I said, he has a kernel of truth here that youth are asking different questions than they've asked in the past, because it's not just taken for granted that Islam is the truth in Yasir Qadhi's case, or that Christianity is the truth in our case. But the solution isn't to not teach anything or to dumb it down to the point where you're effectively not teaching anything. The solution is to teach proper theology. I mean, as a Christian, I believe that proper understanding of theology will give people a worldview that allows them to answer these questions for themselves. I guess Yasir Qadhi doesn't believe that. He doesn't believe that Islamic theology can provide that answer. And I guess I wouldn't disagree. Islamic theology can't provide that answer. But it's very telling. It's very telling that he says we should stop trying to teach theology because people are questioning the moral character of Muhammad and asking whether God exists or not. My solution is to make sure that youth get a lot more theology. But his solution is, nope, don't teach them anything.
It's been requested that I bring up the idea that, we need Islam because otherwise people will kill their daughters. And again, the Islamic sources debunk this. The Hums had forbidden the slaughter of daughters, and one of Muhammad's main opponents had something like 6 daughters and only 2 sons. He wasn't killing his daughters. If he wasn't killing his daughters, and he's a big, bad, evil guy who didn't like Muhammad, who was? The Hums stopped killing their daughters. Why? Because they wanted to stop being hated by the Christians and the Jews, who thought that they were despicable barbarian pagans. So they were doing things to ape the better cultures around them. So they forbade slave raiding to capture sex slaves. And they forbade slaughtering daughters because those were 2 things that made them all contemptible according to all the civilized, more moral people around them. Muhammad brought back one of those contemptible things because he reverted to his basest instincts.
All right, so I have to be done by 4:30, so we have 40 minutes left. GK made a very good point. Muslims do the same with sins they commit. If they don't make it public or expose it, then it's okay, no issue. Yeah, I guess it kind of a postmodern philosophy about sin from all along, right? So more justification for Yasir Qadhi's view. Super chat from Smile to Jahannam.
I can't answer this question in a 20-minute interview, nor is it wise to do so, which is why I never brought this topic up myself. You will not find one lecture of mine about this issue. It should never be brought up in public. And I don't like these idiots, and they are idiots, wallahi. This is not something you discuss amongst the masses, ya akhi. It's not wise. I encourage anybody who is really interested to go deep to take the class. I do this class. It'll be 1 year later.
If you want to learn, sorry, Choked on some water there. If you want to learn more about my cats, take Yasir Qadhi's class, I guess. Thank you very much for your support. Smile to Jahanam says, I'm here for the cats. Sure. And Joji says, what does this clown even think a phrase like God exists means in a brain-dead postmodern framework? Why would any of the youths go for postmodernism with mandatory beards as opposed to the regular? I have no idea. I have no idea why he thinks this is a solution. I guess he just recognizes that the historical pattern of Islam doesn't work and wants to try anything else. I really don't know why he thinks this will work. I guess probably because academia is very supportive of these kinds of ideas. And since he's, very much steeped in academic thought, maybe that's why he absorbs them. Not certain. All right. So we got one more here on authenticity. Then we'll get into or actually, this might be the first one from the Hadith section. We're near the end of the talk. Hadith just come up like at hour 40 minutes or so of the 2-hour talk.
Just like third wave Salafism for its time presented authenticity and a revivalism and an excitement, now post-Salafism is doing the same.
So okay, I just called it authenticity. I don't remember what it was on, but he's saying that to Muslims of 20 years ago or 30 years ago, Salafism presented itself as the authentic way to relate to the Prophet. Now there's a new movement. He's speaking optimistically here, of course, that his own movement that he's supporting is reinvigorating the youth. They're very excited about the authenticity of all ideas are valid and contradictions okay. Somehow I doubt it. Let's dive into the Hadith, and we'll try to go through these fairly quickly since other channels are talking about them, but I did want to cover it since it's part of the talk.
I think one of the main things it has to engage with, and something that we engage with a lot on this channel, is historical critical scholarship that's occurring within Western academia and in Islamic studies more broadly. One example that I think is very relevant is one of the most notable scholars in Quranic studies employing the historical critical method, Nikolai Sinai, has concluded in his most recent book that actually the Salafi approach to the interpretation of the divine attributes is the one that is most in line with the clear reading of the Quranic text, and has even referred to Ibn Taymiyyah as an exemplary scholar in this regard. On the other hand, in the Western Academy, we have a very skeptical approach to the Hadith corpus and its ability to tell us anything really about the Prophet and actually what he did and said, which appears to be diametrically opposed to the Salafi theological emphasis on the Hadith canon. How do you think this sort of academic scholarship and also its increasing accessibility to lay believers will affect or influence the continued development of Salafi or post-Salafi thought?
So we got Yasir Qadhi there at the end, bowing down. He actually spends like 10, 15 seconds thinking about how to answer this question. He was looking down several times throughout the question being asked. He definitely has in his mind, this is holes in the narrative all over again. How do I get out of this? How do I answer these questions? So he thinks about it for a while, and he says, let me be very careful. Let me be very precise on how I answer these questions about Hadith. So basically the gist of it here is going to be that historical method provides some legitimacy to the Quran. He's going to say that it verifies Muhammad wrote it, but obviously you can't make that conclusion. But you can say that it's from the right time period, stuff like that. But that the historical method completely undermines the Hadith, and this is a reality that we have to deal with, is how he's going to approach it. Your thought on the question there, Mary?
I mean, it's a fine question. It's a bit garbled, but sure. Let's find out what he's going to say to this.
All right. So this is the first thing that he says.
I resigned because of the pressure in the academy. I resigned because I can't speak about Israel in the academy. I resigned because my morality is subjugated to public opinion and polls. I can't preach in the mosque if I'm a member of the academy. My preaching of the mosque will impact my position in the academy. That's nonsensical to the academy, but that is the reality.
So he prefaces his remarks by saying he resigned from academia, which I don't know if he actually ever held an academic position, but whatever. He says he resigned from academia long ago because he realized you can't speak against Israel, which is nonsense. Professors do that constantly. They're some of the most vocal voices against Israel, and that you can't be a preacher and also an academic, which I don't think anyone would care about either. Maybe like it'd be hard on you dealing with the intellectual contradiction, but I don't think academia would be like, oh, you preached in a mosque, we will publish your paper. But anyway, he prefaces his remarks basically saying, I quit academia because they won't allow me to believe what I want to believe about the Hadith. Let's go ahead and dive into the next one. So first, before he gets to the Hadith, he wants to talk about the Quran first.
There are also areas where we're going to have to agree to disagree. And we should be brave enough to just acknowledge it and move on. The origin of the Quran is one of them. I am a Muslim. When I'm preaching and teaching, I will use the Quran as evidence. End of story. When I'm presenting an academic paper, I understand for my audience, the Quran is not an evidence. I understand this. Doesn't mean I don't believe it in my life, but I will not then use it in the same way.
So he's trying to preface that. So this is kind of very disingenuous, but he's trying to set up the Hadith this way that, you know, in academia, I have to say the Quran says, but in the mosque, I can say Allah says. Okay, that it still says what it says. That's like a trivial difference, but he's like, you know, there's things we have to disagree about. And then he like tries to soften it by this really trivial example with the Quran. Let me play his one on the origins of the Quran, where he actually gets into the real issue, and then we can discuss the Quran.
Many of the modern academics love to discuss the origin of the Quran, right? Of like the parallels of other, like the Alexander story, other stories, right? And their goal here, even if it's not explicit, is very clear. Their goal is to illustrate that the Prophet ﷺ was very crafty, very ingenious, that he tapped into all of these legends and then he constructed the Quran, right? That is an inherent bias of the Western Academy because they're refusing to acknowledge the theological presumption that we have. And that is, Quran is inspiration.
Okay.
So get this. Hold on, Mary. Just let me get this. This is what he's saying, right? Academia has bias because they don't just assume the Quran comes from Allah. They look at the evidence to see where it came from. They see parallels to pre-existing literature and they conclude it came from there. But that's because of their bias. They just don't believe it came from Allah. Your thoughts?
So here is the Quran itself. So whenever you evaluate something, you look at what it says about itself. The Quran itself says that it is a revelation from Allah that's brought down. Allah, who has a heavenly book up there with him, brings down revelation upon various people. The Jews and Christians have gotten this revelation from this heavenly book, and they have it with them now. And Muhammad likewise has this heavenly book. And so he is writing from it too. So what do you do with this assertion? Well, you look at the scriptures that are with the Jews and Christians, and you find out whether or not they exactly match, as Muhammad is teaching it does, what he has. And you find out that they don't match. The Quran itself says that it's going to match something. And when you read the Quran, you're like, oh, this story seems awfully familiar. So you find out what it does match. The Quran has the story of the 7 sleepers of Ephesus in it. It's there. It's in there. What are you going to do about it? You must do something with this fact. This is a clear fact. The 7 sleepers of Ephesus is in the Quran. The 7 sleepers of Ephesus is a story from the 300s, I believe, the 300s, 200s. Anyway, it's from a particular point in time after Jesus. I think it's from the 300s. It's from the 300s. After Jesus lived, died, was resurrected. Want to say he wasn't resurrected? Fine. People thought he was resurrected. Happened about 200 years later and change, right?
Uh-huh.
It happened in a specific point in time. Muhammad was running around saying that there is no scripture in this interval as well.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also saying that he's revealing the same thing that the Jews and the Christians have. He says the Jews and Christians have the story of the seven sleepers. They have the story of Alexander the Great in their holy books. It's just not true. What do you do with that? You find out what he is actually taking from. He's taking from these legends. He's taking from apocryphal sources that are not scripture. He is taking from the best-selling novel of late antiquity, which he put the equivalent of Harry Potter in his book. Why? Because Muhammad inherently believed that something that is a book should rightfully be something holy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have this story that you're writing down, all right, Lava, you're just going away. Just block her. Block her for now. She doesn't get to talk for the rest of this 5 because she was throwing a fit that a survey did not ask questions of every human being.
Mary, just drop it. Just drop it.
Yep.
We don't need to discuss it again. You're playing into what she wants by discussing it again.
So anyway, right. So
Yaser. So I want to give Yaser the slightest bit of credit here, right? Academia does have an anti-supernatural bias, but he's taking it way further and saying that the only reason they say that this story that existed before Muhammad isn't from Allah is because they just don't want to accept the Quran, which is nonsense. If the story about the Quran is true, there should be verification of it, or there at least shouldn't be direct contradiction of the idea. And instead of like dealing with that, he just says, we can just agree to disagree. They think it came from the Alexander legends. We think it came from Allah. Whatever, just agree to disagree, move on. And this is the framework that he's trying to set up for the Quran, for the Hadith. But then he actually throws the Hadith way further under the bus than the Quran here.
My question to Yasir Qadhi is, okay, I read in here. It's supposed to be in the scripture.
Uh-huh.
I should look for it in another source. If he's saying it has no parallel, it has no equivalent, it didn't come from anything, he is calling his own book a lie. Because his book says that it comes from somewhere else. His book tells us that this is in the scripture of the Jews and Christians. So the question is, what does this text think that scripture is? This text believes scripture to be the story of the seven sleepers of Ephesus. It thinks that the scripture is the great adventures of Alexander the Great, these fictionalized accounts.
Mm-hmm. And what here, let me just address this real quick, and then we need to go to the next clip because I want to get through these. Awad says the story of the seven sleeper was revealed in reaction to a challenge posed by the pagans at the time. Indeed it was. Well, I think it was technically rabbis.
Challenge?
But it was to bring the true story about what happened, and Muhammad can't figure it out, so he goes and asks around a lot of people, eventually comes around with it a little bit later and says this is the true revelation about what really happened, except it's not. It's a fictional story. That's the problem. The problem is exactly this, that Muhammad revealed it in response to a challenge and said it was real, said this is from Allah, when it's not. That's the problem, Wad. You try to be academic and neutral for once in your life. Oh my goodness gracious. All right.
So the challenge was specifically to reveal something that the Jews have in their scriptures. The Jews just lied. So
they made it up. It was a trick.
It was a trick, and he fell for it. So
that's the problem. All right, we need to move on. So This is Yasir Qadhi on his qualifications to talk about Hadith.
Hadith is another area we're going to have to really disagree. There is no, now I hope there is, but as of yet, as somebody who's my undergraduate was in the College of Hadith. So I specialized, and it is said, and I'm not just saying because I'm a graduate, this was the well-known reality, that the College of Hadith in the University of Medina in the 90s and the 70s, 80s, and 90s, they've changed it now. It was considered to be the most advanced study of Hadith at the undergraduate level in the entire world. And as somebody who went through that and has talked to other people from other institutes, I would very much agree with that, the amount of studying that we did. So what I'm trying to say is I've studied Hadith inside out. I have ijazat more than I do. I forgot how many I have. I have plenty of ijazat. And I've also studied the historical critical method. In fact, for a period of my life, my second year of Yale, before I decided Ibn Taymiyyah, I really wanted to write a PhD on the isnad analysis and basically a Muslim defense of it, which would have been utilizing the historical critical method. So anyway, my point being, I'm well aware. My preliminary conclusion, and please audience understand, I could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, please correct me. My preliminary conclusion is there is no middle ground.
So he's super well qualified, everyone, and all his expertise on Hadith, which I'm not even going to bother disputing because it's I'll just grant it that he's an expert. He really knows what he's talking about. He studied the Hadith. He studied the historical method. There's no middle ground between them. What does that mean? Well, he's going to explain, but basically that means that the historical method says the Hadith are false. That is basically what he means by there's no middle ground. You either have to accept Hadith science or you have to accept the historical method. You can't take from both. And now let me play the next clip where he makes that explicit.
Historical critical method and isnad analysis are two diametrically opposed ways of looking at early Islam and reports, and I don't find much commonality between them as of yet. Obviously in small areas there, but overall, two diametrically opposed epistemologies.
He calls them epistemologies. I guess maybe technically Hadith science can count as an epistemology, but epistemology, study of how you determine the truth. There are two different ways of figuring out what the truth is, and they don't come to the same conclusions except in small little bits. That's what Qadhi's saying. What do you think, Mary?
So, I mean, there are epistemologies. How do we know what's true, right? And he goes to the historical critical method. Okay, historical critical method has its role, but the overall activity of historians in general with any text, I wouldn't throw it into this historical critical method.
No, I usually just call it the historical method. I mean, historical critical is more like how to analyze the scriptures. Yeah.
And it's a particular approach to scripture, which the Hadith wouldn't be scripture anyway. But
well, it would be in Islam.
Well, I mean, it isn't scripture. It isn't from God, right? It's a report about something Muhammad did. So, yeah, you don't tell whether or not something is true or not based on who is in a list of people who said that they heard it from someone else. Mm-hmm. The list that does not begin with the original tellers. Like this is isnad itself. Chains were applied later to existing ahadith that had been told without chains. They were attempts at reconstruction. Oh, who must have said this to someone else? You don't actually have evidences for chains. Chains don't come with the text. So it might have some basis if they were all written and not oral, so it doesn't depend on the fallibility of human memory over generations, for heaven's sakes. And if these were intact from the beginning, maybe it would contribute to kind of the idea of provenance when art, right? It would be like the provenance. Provenance is important in establishing the authenticity of art pieces that could be forged. So it could be a system of provenance. but it doesn't actually give you true, it dates it to a certain, but when the provenance itself is just names, it's not anything more than names, those can be forged very easily. So when the provenance itself is something easily forged, you don't actually have provenance.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's kind of the distinction.
That is actually a very good analogy there, right? Because artworks can be forged with a very high degree of accuracy, provenance becomes very important. An unknown Van Gogh appears on the market, like, oh, did Van Gogh really paint that? Probably not, right? Which is kind of what the Hadith actually are, right? They just appear on the stage, and then they tack on a list to prove that they're legit, but that would just be the same as someone making up a history of the artwork, right? It has no actual basis in history, and thus adds nothing. And that's not to say that that means the Hadith are completely false. It just means that the historical method, or what Qadhi for some reason calls the historical critical method, would attach zero value to the list of names. So, so what is the state of things? Maybe there'll be a solution. Let's see what Yasir Qadhi says. Maybe someone will find a solution soon. What does Qadhi think?
This is my preliminary analysis, and I would love to be proven wrong. And I would love for somebody to come and say, no, you are absolutely incorrect, and we can prove hadith via the historical critical method, and this is how we do it. And I would literally thank that person and be the first to buy the book and love to see it. As of yet, though, I'm a little bit pessimistic, and I don't see there to be much of a commonality. So we're going to have to simply say, if you believe in the, that the Sunnah has been preserved by the Hadith, you're going to have to follow a certain epistemology, a certain paradigm. And if you are, like, as you're aware, and you're an academic channel, right? You're well aware, nobody in the academy affirms the Muslim Sunni science of Hadith.
And then we'll see that little bit again, but the host is in complete agreement that nobody in academia affirms isnad, right? No one says that this is a valid way to determine the truth. Guy says, I hope that we'll be able to prove the hadith, but I'm not optimistic. I'm pessimistic. I don't think it's going to happen. We're just going to have to agree to disagree. If you believe it, then believe it. If you want to look at the evidence, well, that's going to lead you in a different direction. That's basically what he's saying. Anything you want to add there, or should we just dive into the next one?
I mean, yeah, it's something that's easy to fabricate on its own. So it doesn't provide evidence of not fabricating something. That's the problem. If you're going to provide evidence that something can't be forged, you can't do it with something that's trivially forged itself.
Mm-hmm. Nissan Addict says the historical critical method often gives more credibility to the less trusted isnad because it's less likely to be a forgery. In practice, that's true. In academia, Mary doesn't really think that that's a very valid criteria either, though. That the reason they get a better criteria is more about their legal importance than whether or not they're a forgery. But Nissan Addict is not wrong. This is often the way that academia looks at things.
Yeah, and it's a bad method. It's a bad method. Do you care to buff? Do you want to use this hadith? If you want to use the hadith, you're gonna find somewhere someone who says that this is the correct isnad for it and it's a reliable isnad. So you'll hunt around till you get it, or find somebody and if you're not a person who's unscrupulous enough to forge it yourself, you'll find somebody who was, so you'll get a good isnad for it if you want to use it.
Mm-hmm. All right, so now he's going to tell us what the most we could say about hadith, the most optimistic thing we could say about hadith in current academia.
Nobody in the academy affirms the Muslim Sunni science of hadith. Nobody. It is considered to be completely discredited. I'm just being factual. I'm describing. I'm not saying which one is right or wrong. I'm just saying the max you'll get, like Harold Motsky and others, are going to say, well, we can say that some hadith definitely go back to some tabi'un. Mm-hmm. That's like the max you can say. Mm-hmm.
So both hosts seem to agree with him. These two academic, Muslims in some sense. It is an Islamic channel. Obviously, they're not very conservative, right? She's not covered up. He has no signs of like dressing in a particular way either. They're not obviously conservative, but they are Muslims in some sense, and they're in a complete agreement, right? That the best you can say, and I think that Mary would probably be in the same camp, is that some of the Hadith you can affirm, others you can't. Would that be correct, Mary? As far as your view goes.
Yeah, it's academic, like, and he's saying that tabarun, meaning that they're being told by the generation after Muhammad. I think that in general, the most reliable bit of the isnad is the first name. Now, is it fully reliable? Not at all, no, but it's the most reliable part of it.
Absolutely. So he's saying the best you can do is say that, yeah, some of them are good. All right. Now he's going to compare the Quran to Hadith. And I think this is actually very telling, what he says about the historical method applied to the Quran versus the Hadith.
Here's the point. We can academically prove, by and large, that the Prophet ﷺ preached the Quran, the words that we have today. The Uthmanic Mus'haf, that's like a solid given, right? The wordings of the Quran, by and large, we can academically, of course, believers, we say that from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the academy has pretty much proven scientifically, I mean, through the historical critical method, that there's an Uthmanic Mus'haf. Yeah. That much is beyond reasonable doubt.
So he makes the assertion that they prove they go back to Muhammad. Again, I would say that the historical critical can actually make that conclusion. But what it does say is that what we see is compatible with them coming from Muhammad with minor development, not zero development, but minor development over a period of a short period of time, but definitely going beyond the life of Muhammad. I would say that's fair, other than him saying that it says it goes back to Muhammad. But notice what he's saying, right? When it comes to Hadith, he's saying we have to just use a different method. When it comes to the Quran, the historical critical method works, which means that if it works for the Quran and the Hadith are legitimate, it should work for the Hadith too. But for some reason, he doesn't see a problem with that, of saying that the Quran is compatible, or our understanding of the Quran is compatible with what facts can tell us. Our understanding of the Hadith is not compatible with what facts can tell us. So we take the historical critical method as helpful for the Quran, and we just ignore it for the Hadith, is basically what he's getting at. And I think that is just really telling, right? That he doesn't actually care about anything factual. He just says, what works? Okay, I'll use it. What do you think, Mary?
Pretty much. I mean,
yeah, like I don't think his description of the Quran is completely accurate. I certainly don't think it's just a given, but it is at least a possibility, according to academia, that it goes back to the words of Muhammad, or
so
Muhammad claimed came from God.
There was this doubting school. So there was this doubting school that emerged after World War II that became really popular because of challenging. Okay, how do we know that it's really as old as people say it is? How do we know these things are authentic? Big rejection till the Sanaa palimpsest, and that really did essentially cut off the major theses of the doubting school at the knees. After it was brought out, and it's 20% of the Quran, there are entire phrases that are different. However, as a fractional manuscript, as evidence for the general, there are no surahs that are not in the Quran that are there. Everything that is there is in the Quran. Though there are entire phrases that are different and swapped out, that does show that it's a very clear snapshot, a kind of survey of the material, that the basic text was very similar to what we have now by the end of the, or even most people believe, let's be very fair here. Most people believe that by 650 this was set, which means that you really can't say that it was like made up whole cloth. This really was something that came from Muhammad. The vast majority of academia today will say that the general narrative of these revisions taking place right after Muhammad died, and the compilation and an official version being produced that was acceptable to most Muslims was generally true in its gist. You can argue about specifics, argue about details, and I would say that the evidence overwhelmingly points in that direction too. So the doubting school really has been eviscerated, and the major proponents of it have admitted that, yeah, our stances are not entirely tenable. You have a few very small voices today who are still trying to make the text much more flexible than it was.
And I hate to do this, but it needs to be said. Jay is relying on the discredited research in a lot of what he says. He's relying on things that have no standing in academia, and he's presenting it as like some new discovery, but it's proposals that were made 10, 20 years ago and have been thoroughly rejected by academia. And he's presenting it's like new breaking research. No, that's not the case. The theories he's relying on are basically debunked, as Mary said, and as Yasir Qadhi oversold it, but still is more or less correct that the critical methods provide some support for the Quran and don't for the Hadith. So, Wad, you didn't answer my question. My question was, so he said that, Allah put this story and presented it as true because Allah knew that the pagans were going to ask him about it, and he didn't bother to tell them it was false because he's a god of deception. But that wasn't my question, Wad. My question was, how could you possibly say anything couldn't be in the Quran then? Right? You have no way of verifying. Muhammad could talk about his bowel movements, and you'd say Allah foreknew from all of eternity that people would want to know about Muhammad's bowel movements. Therefore, this came from Allah. You have no test. You have no ability to determine whether this is from Allah under your methodology, if you want to call it.
What he's saying is that Allah includes lies.
Right? Because people will ask about it.
Because people will ask about it. So the only way that Muhammad could know about the most popular, the Harry Potter of its day, the most popular novel in the history of antiquity, that they were saying it because they knew that Muhammad couldn't know about it.
Right. That's literally what the story is.
Know about
this is secret knowledge.
It's secret knowledge, and the Quran revealed it. And that's what's plausible. The Quran put a fictional account into it to prove that it's true and he's hearing from God. Rather than people ask him about something they knew was fiction to see whether or not they could trick him into putting fiction into his book that is supposedly of truth from God. No. The only way he could know about, if I went up to someone, I wanted to find out whether or not they're hearing from God, I'd ask them the plot of Harry Potter. And if they could tell me the plot of Harry Potter, then clearly they're getting it from God.
Especially if they say that God revealed this as a true story.
Right, God revealed it as a true story. And because that's what Muhammad said, this is a true story that Allah revealed. And what they needed to do to prove they're really hearing from God is to tell me of the boy who lived with the jagged scar on his forehead, and that way I know it's from God. There we go.
Exactly. So Robert is definitely more intellectually honest than Jay Smith, but if you want to hear the debate with Robert, that'll happen on Friday with Mary. No further comments on
he's
him
relying on a lot of the same people who have been discredited. He just doesn't know and hasn't looked into how they've been discredited. He's just taking their assertions in academia as if they're using normal academic methodology and is accrediting them with that level of believability.
But Robert's position also would have zero standing in academia, that Muhammad is a pure fictional character. Anyway, let's get Yasir Qadhi's final thoughts on Hadith, which is also extremely telling about how he approaches these kinds of questions.
When I become Sheikh Yasir and I go and preach and teach, I will quote Sahih Bukhari and I will quote Sahih Muslim and I will say قال الله قال رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم, and that's the preacher. And I understand in the academy I cannot quote Bukhari and this will be what the Prophet said. I understand this, so I'm just going to have to use a different, epistemology.
So in the mosque, he'll just say it's true. In academia, he'll know he couldn't possibly get away with saying it's true, and that's just it. You just got to have two faces. That's his methodology of solving the problems, and that's his methodology for solving the problems within Islam as well. You just allow contradictory ideas and say they're both fine in their own setting.
And the issue is that what's really funny is that he doesn't publish in academia. He hasn't published anything but his dissertation. So it's really funny how he wants to be the academic and he doesn't actually publish.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why does he?
His books really are, I mean, they're not exactly popular. They're kind of in between, right? They're kind of in between proper academic work and pop level. But he views himself as an academic intellectual, but also says he quit academia and with nothing to do with it. I mean, who knows? Who knows? Yeah. He's just all over the place. All right, we got a few more clips from his closing thoughts. There was a segment after this which had no relevance, and then it's a few things from his closing thoughts. First, on who Muhammad was.
There's only one individual, and his name is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that we have to follow unconditionally. Everybody else, including Ibn Taymiyyah, much less the modern Salafi scholars, they're human beings.
So I guess Muhammad's not a human being. Basically, he's saying that, no one has to adhere to what Ibn Taymiyyah or anyone else said. You can form your own ideas. You don't have to follow any scholar, which is contrary to mainstream Islam, in which truth is determined by the consensus of scholars. But he's saying everyone can make their own determination. There's only one non-human individual that we all must follow. God himself. Oh, wait, no, I mean Muhammad. Muhammad is the non-human, infallible individual that we all must follow. Any thoughts on that real quick, Mary? She might be trying to rejoin with a different device. I'll just go ahead and go to the next clip. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. Anyway, now Yasir Qadhi is going to tell you what his goal is, right? Mary's speculating on his goal.
You can bring up the second Mary.
Yeah, it's up. You can't, the image didn't connect. So I added it, the volume I added, maybe it isn't actually connected, and just disconnect and reconnect. Oh, wait, there it goes. There it goes. It connected now. You're good. Indeed. I use a different epistemology. This is so common between leftists and Islamists to hijack language for their own use. I mean, technically it is a different epistemology. It's just not what we would think of, because it doesn't actually determine truth. Anyway, next up is Yasir Qadhi's goal. Mary was speculating on it. Now he'll tell you himself what his goal with this whole talk was.
My goal really is to achieve as much love and harmony and unity amongst the Muslims as possible, and to empathize with different strands. Even if you disagree, I am not saying all strands are the same. I'm not preaching relativism. What I am saying is that perhaps the differences have been exaggerated more than they need to. That's what I'm saying. And perhaps even if we disagree, we can still get along for other projects and good. That's what I'm saying.
So what his goal is to help Muslims get along. He says he's not teaching relativism, but I failed to understand how it's different. I guess it's pretend it doesn't existism instead of relativism. But he's saying anyone can believe whatever they want and they're fine, basically. Other than like they have to worship Allah and acknowledge the Muhammad. He's going to say that in his final thought. But other than those two things, Muslims can believe absolutely anything they want about who God is, about shirk, about Tawhed, about the fundamental doctrines of Islam, about the secondary doctrines of Islam. Anything you want, you can believe. My goal is just for us all to get along. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. We got two more quotes from him. The first says that Tawhed doesn't matter and shirk doesn't matter. And then the last one, I interpret it as everyone passes. Like he says he's not teaching relativism, but here's his own closing thoughts. First on Tawhed.
Understand that other movements have different definitions of Tawheed and Shirk. Even if they disagree, they can disagree with etiquette and adab and empathy. Say, I don't agree with you, but then say it with a smile and say, Allah will be our judge. That's all that I'm asking. I'm not asking for a radical revolutionary change in their theology. I'm simply asking for them to understand, just like past Salafis have evolved, they too should evolve for the modern times.
So I'm asking, I'm not asking them to change their theology. I'm just asking them to evolve and realize that the theology doesn't matter anymore. They can believe whatever they want about Tawhed. They can believe whatever they want about Shirk. I mean, what could be more fundamental than Tawhed for a Muslim, obviously?
But if you don't, so he wants them to believe whatever they want to believe, and that's all okay. But if they do believe something, they won't necessarily believe that everybody else is okay. Like,
I know.
You can't have it both ways. You can't say everybody can believe whatever they want and they should all believe what I believe. That everybody can believe what they want. Like, you can't have both.
I know, it's inherently self-contradictory. It destroys itself. But this is what we see in postmodernist thought. This is what we see in wokeism and secular thought. Everyone should just believe that everyone can believe whatever they want, except if you believe that people can't just believe whatever they want. And then in that case, you're a horrible monster. That's kind of what Qadhi's saying, right? All I'm asking is for you to accept that my heretical, contradictory beliefs are equally as valid as your hereditary contradictory beliefs.
Yeah, but again, that's a fundamental belief. So the only fundamental belief that he's accepting is his fundamental belief, which he's couching as any of these beliefs. It's just it always makes my head spin when people do this.
Yeah, like I mean, I literally think I wouldn't have guessed this before I watched this talk, but after watching the whole thing, I watched the whole 2+ hours. You guys only saw like, I don't know, 25, 30-ish minutes of segments that I pulled out. I watched the whole thing. After watching the whole thing, I think his position is literally, if someone claims to be a Muslim, if it has some connection to historical Islam, then it's as equally valid as any other Islam. It might be wrong, right? It might be wrong in a factual sense, but it doesn't matter, because what matters is that we get along. And I'll save what he says for his last clip here, but there's basically no criteria to be a Muslim other than saying that you identify with something historically related to Islam.
And what that does furthermore is it takes, so he uses as part of his argument that none of these things have any basis in, none of these claims that people make are actually true. So they're all false. They're all innovations. They're all modernist. So we should just say that they're all true. Because they're all lies, we should believe them all to be true. I think that that's a fair summary. What do you think? Because I really think that that's what it boils down to. His entire argument is, it's lies, therefore we should consider it all true.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that it's basically postmodernism, right? That there is no truth, that everyone's picture of the past is just what they imagine. I mean, postmodernism is largely focused on the past, but everyone's picture of the past or the present world is just what they make it out to be. There is no absolute truth. There's only how people relate to the world. And everyone thus has their own truth. And in effect, everything's a lie. So we'll just say it's all true, right? Because if you say,
but only for Islam, only for Islam, so that all Muslims will be united by all admitting it's all lies, so it's all true.
Yeah. I mean, that's basically what he said. He says, I'm not teaching relativism, but I mean, that's one of the hallmarks of postmodernism, is that there is no such thing as moral reality, and different societies construct their own morality. And if you're looking at some past society or some present society that believes differently than you, and you're saying what they're doing is wrong, then you're in the wrong, so to speak, for judging them. And but where is he judging anyone? Where is he judging anyone? Like, he literally said that an anthropomorphic picture of God was blasphemous, But then he also said that it's a valid previous Islamic belief that some people hold today. So if it's blasphemous but okay to hold, then everything is acceptable, as near as I can tell, under Yasir Qadhi. As long as you say you're Muslim and you don't attack other Muslims.
He wants a secular political Islam is what he really wants. He wants a secular political Islam that takes over the world.
Yeah. He wants the worst aspects. He wants to divorce Islam, the political movement of Islam, from the theology and just do the political part. Just do the worst part from an outsider's perspective. I mean, of course, the theology is horrific because it sends people to hell. And I would say it's actually the worst part. But from the, non-Muslim who has to have relations with Muslims, the political aggressive part is the worst part. And he's like, that's the only part we should adhere to.
Yep, and this lip service is enough. This lip service is enough. So in a way, he is kind of returning to Muhammad's roots, saying that you need to be a submitter, and that's what matters. And Allah will send most of you to hell anyway for being wrong, although Yasir Qadhi won't even say that. But the important thing is that you obey. And Yasir Qadhi is like, yeah, that's what Muslims are. They're the people who obey. As long as they say that they're obeying, then just take it for granted that they're fine.
Mm-hmm. All right, this is Yasir Qadhi's last word in the talk.
So in my opinion, all of you have passed the bar of salvation as long as you believe in Allah, take the Prophet as a role model, and then attempt to live your lives in piety. And with that, inshallah, we will conclude. And I appreciate your time. And just for the record, I believe this is the longest interview I've ever done in my life.
So that's it. Say you believe in Allah, say that Muhammad's your role model, and try your best to live a pious life. And that's it, you're Muslim. He literally says everyone who does these things, no matter what their theology is, even if they believe that Allah is a barking dog, they're good by me, as long as they affirm those those two propositions, and then try to live a life of piety, whatever that means in the context of you form your own truth, right? That's what he's saying. That is relativism. That is 100% exactly relativism. Everyone should follow whatever they believe, and as long as they do so to the best of their abilities, they're equally valid. It's just not relativism because he excludes it to you have to claim the title of Muslim and say the word Allah and say the word Muhammad. That's the only reason it's not absolute relativism.
Pretty much. I mean, and again, I don't see what he thinks he's going to get.
I don't know. Who knows what he... I mean, he gave it the longest talk of his life, or the longest interview of his life. He thought he was doing something for sure.
Right, he really thinks he's going to be this modernist savior of Islam, and he just throws Islam into it every time.
All right, let me quickly run through these last comments here because I got another live stream coming up in 20 minutes, and I want to eat something in between, so I got to wrap up quickly. Villainous says, hey, Thaddeus, why are you giving one of the best Christian apologists such a hard time? Indeed, Yasir Qadhi constantly throwing Islam under the bus for us, doing our job for us. Thank you, Yasir Qadhi. We appreciate it. Goji with a super chat.
We're asking you to give a loan to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and believe me, that will be paid back in ways you can never imagine.
Who is it that would loan Allah a goodly loan so he may multiply it for him many times over?
Allahu Akbar. I love that verse. Every time we donate to projects, we're giving a loan to our Creator, the most generous, who will return it to us in this life.
Brothers and sisters, can you afford to miss out on this opportunity?
So Joji given the small loan, not they said, I promise you Allah will pay you back in this life. So Joji wants to know, how can you sue Allah if he doesn't pay back double of this small loan? Well, you got to take him to civil court, which means you got to serve him a lawsuit. So you're going to have to locate where Allah is. I believe he's sitting on or maybe above the throne. Muslims, ironically, right, we're talking about our Yasir Qadhi saying they have these small theological differences. There's an actual small theological difference that Muslims will declare someone to be a complete kafir for is saying on instead of above, or vice versa, depending on their own view. but you got to find Allah. You got to serve him papers, take him to civil court. So good luck finding him, since I don't think he's on any throne. I meant to address this earlier, but from Lambert here, could it be that Yasir Qadhi doesn't like a Wahhabi having control of the agenda, and he likes other versions of Islam just as much? He is trying to defend Wahhab. He is trying to defend no Wahhabi version. No, I said I'd bring this up later after we got through his material on Wahhabism, and I forgot, but it actually works well here at the end. What he actually believes is that the only thing he doesn't like is a version saying other versions are invalid. So he doesn't like Wahhabism because it takfires other Muslims or other people who claim to be Muslims and say they're not real Muslims. That's what he doesn't like. Anything other than that, he says, is fine. The only thing you're not allowed to do in Islam is declare other people not to be Muslims, in Yasir Qadhi's view. Colt says, since the Hadith are now disregarded, how do you know the rules? Well, they're not disregarded. You just can't rely on actual truth and facts. You still believe them. You still assert them in the mosque. You don't discard them. You just say, yeah, we're just going to have to agree to disagree, Mr. Intellectual looking at evidence. We don't look at evidence in Islam. We just go based on our theology. And our theology tells us we got to follow the example of Muhammad. And we know the example of Muhammad from Hadith, or maybe from biography, Sirah literature, right? He said that was distinctive of Salafis, that they put more emphasis on Hadith, far more emphasis on Hadith than Sirah. I mean, okay, maybe to a degree that's true. You might be able to look to the Sirah, is basically what I'm saying, but you got to find it somewhere. You got to find the example, or you're in direct disobedience to the Quran. So we're going to find that example regardless of what academia tells us. And finally, from Misha SWB. And I did not hear that. I don't know if it played.
I didn't.
Mr. Ho's narrative has become innovator and wants people to innovate from the holy narrative. Ours must put a stop to this corruption.
There it goes. There it went and played. It just took it a second for some reason. Thank you very much, Miss SWP. And you heard the ape apologist explaining things well. In 15 minutes, I'll be back with Chris from Speaker's Corner, or Chris at Speaker's Corner, whatever the technical name of his channel is, to talk about Muhammad Hijab, or more accurately, to talk about Hassam, who is still going to Speaker's Corner. But when someone tries to ask him about his role in the cover-up of Muhammad Hijab, he says, oh, you're harassing me. I'm running away. I'll get the police if you don't stop harassing me by asking me questions in a place where you're supposed to come and ask me questions. That's why I'm here, so people can come ask me questions. Don't you dare ask me questions that I don't want to answer. So I'll be discussing that in 15 minutes.
Hilarious.
Mary will have a debate with Robert Spencer on Friday. Looking forward to that for sure. I'll be helping her with debate prep this week. I will be streaming with David Wood, however, on Thursday evening on this channel, on Reason Answers. He'll be a guest here, and we'll be comparing the Muhammad Hijab case to that of King David, and the difference between how the true God handles these situations and how the God of the Islamic Dawah community, at minimum, handles these situations. Any final thoughts from you, Mary?
I am really always baffled as to what is actually happening in the mind of Yasir Qadhi. I don't understand the thought processes that go into the decisions that he makes, because he thinks he really, I mean, people are like, he's a Mossad agent. I found some Muslims accusing him of being a Mossad agent. He isn't. He really thinks that he is going to be the one to stop the apostasy. That's really, he thinks that this is a solution to stop apostasy. Police officer just cut me off without signaling. Nice. Anyway, who is going to stop the apostasy that's plaguing Islam, and this is going to be the solution. And I have no idea how this is going to help the apostasy. No idea. But this is why he's doing it. He believes that this will stop apostasy. And I don't understand the logic.
No, I guess he just thinks that Muslims are apostatizing, not because of, facts on the internet and discussions with non-Muslims and whatnot, but because Muslims are too busy attacking one another to just blindly say that other Muslims are good no matter what they believe. That's what causing apostasy. Not the reason why your children are asking questions about the moral character of Muhammad. No, that couldn't be it. It couldn't be what's prompting those questions. It must be because other Muslims are saying that they're not a real Muslim because they don't believe the same exact things about the method of prayer or the method of washing or trivial things like what constitutes shirk and what doctrine of Tawhed is, trivial stuff like that. They have disagreements on, and that's what's causing the mass apostasy in Yasir Qadhi's mind, I guess. Who knows? Thank you all for joining us today. You will be redirected to that other stream. Hope to see you there. If not, see you again soon on another stream. God bless everyone, and we'll close out with the words of Pastor Jake.
Pray this ceaselessly. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me.